Let's rock. I bought a Christian record from Christian record store. Would have bought two, but wants to keep money for the poor. Came back home and put it on my turntable. Played it backwards cause I wanted to know what's going on. Soon all I wanted to do was to go and get drunk. Go and get drunk and take lots of drugs. Take lots of drugs and have lots of sex. Then go out and kill everybody in my neighborhood. Kill. Burn and rock. Christians maybe wanna burn and rock. Burn and rock. Kill everybody and quit my job. Burn and rock. Christians maybe wanna burn and rock. Yeah. Glory hole. Yeah. So I broke into my neighbor's house and killed them with an axe. Stole all the money and drove off with the Humvee. Got myself loads of drugs and booze. Then found myself an orgy and had lots of nasty sex. It was kinky sex. Burn and rock. Christians maybe wanna burn and rock. Burn and rock. Have lots of sex and take lots of drugs. Burn and rock. Christians maybe wanna burn and rock. Yeah. Myself going and rock the band. Got all smacked out while I don't cry. Went across the country spreading fire and disease. And I prayed to the devil down on my knees. Dearest Satan, you nasty son of a gun. Dearest Satan, I know I'm having fun. Dearest Satan, I thank you for the sex. Dearest Satan, drugs and all the rest. So Satan, why don't you tell those Christians to make another Christian record? That I don't need to play backwards no more. No more. It's us. Burn and rock. Christians maybe wanna burn and rock. Burn and rock. Love the devil and believe in God. Burn and rock. Christians maybe wanna burn and rock. Burn and rock. Love the devil and believe in God. Burn and rock. Christians maybe wanna burn and rock. Burn and rock.
All right. Think I'm gonna play. I want to see what this guy's up to. Haven't checked in on Mr. Light Skin Historian with his Mulatto Kids Have Mental Disorders. What a fucking country. What a country. All right. Let's see what you're up to, Mr. Light Skin Historian.
This with science, and I mean what I say, and it's not to
Do you mind if science is like never is not right, correct? But let's just keep it.
I like his wizard's hat.
It's not to speak down on you or nothing like that. People ask me a question, I have to answer honestly and with a scientific mindset with it. When you check the wound of any other race and you check the resonant frequency or the pH balance of a black woman's wound and of her vagina, it resonates.
That is a lot of information that guy just spit at us. I just want to listen to that. Oh my God. That was pretty wild shit.
I have to answer honestly and with a scientific mindset with it. When you check the womb of any other race and you check the resonant frequency or the pH balance of a black woman's womb and of her vagina, it resonates with the black man.
Vagina. I already love this guy.
And it's the compatibility is balanced. When you check that with a white man or you check that with a Mongoloid or Asian, the resonant frequency, and even I have a video I can send to you that Dr. Savy spoke on this as well. The resonant frequency and
it's funny, this guy's name is Yah something, but he said black, white, those are not even racist, but his name is I guess he believe this dude is he's bugged out. He's right about some stuff, but he's bugged out. He's confused himself. To me, he mixes different ideologies up and comes up with different type of stuff. For example, his name is Yah something. So he talks about the Bible at first and he tries to mix ideologies up with the Bible. It's not, he mixes different concepts up. But since he wants to talk about race and things like that, Dr. Sebi, according to, you Hebrew Israelites, which I do believe in the scriptures.
That is my audience, is Hebrew Israelites.
But everybody's genetic makeup is different based off whatever nation that you come from. So if a black American is completely different from a Nigerian, a black American is completely different from an Ethiopian. All right, but keep in mind that even a lot of these quote-unquote Israelites in the Bible are completely mixed up. Even the 12 tribes is mixed. Or the lineage of King David and Christ is mixed. And specifically mulatto background, kind of like. So, I'm gonna play the video so I can get to the point, because he called.
This is like the anthropology version of the Africans that we watch learning to fly. This is them learning anthropology.
Calls out a specific mixed group out of all the mixes on the planet Earth. He specifically focuses on one. But let's see what he says.
Electrical frequency is different for every other race. Our mineral is different from your mineral. Our mineral will be iron phosphate.
Well, yes, it depends on what nation you are, and on top of that, a lot of this stuff is just BS. All right, they just in the black community, these dudes, they just make up random shit in their imagination, and they'll look you dead in the eye and make you. And they're good with that. They're good at making shit up, and these ideologies, these wild thoughts, and convincing people that the shit they just said was real, it's authentic, like it's like a real thing. They say the melanin connects with the moon, and that's how you put your feet on the grass, and it makes the black man's skin darker. All this other.
God damn, I am so happy I listened to this video. I'm so glad I started out with this. I need a little bit of a pick-me-up. That's fucking awesome. The black man steps on the grass. Oh, God, I love it.
Shit, they just randomly make this stuff up, and they get people to actually believe in this stuff. All right, it's funny because I'm gonna keep talking about the Bible, about the whole melanin. Since I seen him talk about the Bible before, and his name is Yah something. The Bible doesn't even deal with melanin. If you read the Bible, it's not about melanin at all, and melanin is a real thing. All right, but keep in mind that since I said that Israel is a chosen people, which I agree. Keep in mind that Israel is not even the darkest nation on the planet Earth. You have nations that are darker than the Israelites. Melanin is a thing, a real thing, but it's not what they trying to make it out to be. The whole melanin stuff with them is about getting people to worship their skin tone, especially a very darker one. A dark brown skin tone. But melanin is not even important. But let's keep going.
Caucasian minerals usually is zinc, and Asian mineral is usually copper. So the main minerals that's in our blood dictate the frequency and the vibratory rate that's in our wombs, that's in our organ. Each organ have its own frequency and tone. Melanin, or what we're going to call carbon constituents or carbon constituent chains, is at a different.
when he said that each organ has its own like tune, I just imagine like some Chinese guy like hitting the triangle. You know what I mean? Like he's just finding the perfect pitch for your liver. I love this kind of stuff, dude. I love it so much.
Frequency. We have neuromelanin, we have eumelanin, we have pheomelanin and cosmic melanin. Yeah, a lot of different races don't have neuromelanin at all. Y'all just have ew and pheomelanin. So there's different resonance and frequencies in our bodies that's different from y'all. So if you start matching frequencies that are out of tune with each other, you create what I would call a imbalance in creation or imbalance in a cell. So the cells come out already genetically weakened, and it automatically come out mutating, and that's why you see a lot of mulatto or mixed children actually have a lot.
See, that's what I wanted to get to. Out of all the mixes you could have pointed out in the world, not everybody, but the vast majority, it's so many different mixes in the world. But why did you singly point out the mulatto? Why did you singly point them out? You didn't point out half Black American, half Nigerian children. You didn't point out half white, half Asian children, half Mexican, half so-called Indian children. Why did you specifically focus on the mulatto children? All right. Because they have an agenda they're trying to push. And I'm not saying that some of the stuff he's not saying is kind of correct, but a lot of stuff, they're just making this stuff up in their minds. And it's just a scare tactic to shame mulattoes. All right. But this guy believes in the scriptures. But if you read the scriptures, race mixing is everywhere in the Bible. Even the mulatto kids is in the Bible. It's there. Well, let's keep going.
Social skill issues. They have a lot of mental issues. They suffer from a lot of depression. They have anger issues, and these are just.
Well, please show me.
He's saying that the mulatto children have anger issues. No offense, sir, but that, and no pun intended, but that's a little bit of the pot calling the kettle black.
The stats were mulatto kids is just like a real, like, they're just now growing. They haven't been very, it's not a large amount of them. So where are you getting these statistics from? All right. And on top of that, show me where these mulatto kids are underperforming at anything. You mean to tell me that mulatto kids, the kids that y'all call soft and very peaceful, they have anger issues? And I'm not saying that doesn't exist for certain people. That is a real thing for some people who may be mixed or whatever. But you mean to tell me that they're more angry than black kids? Where are these mulatto? It's funny, I just got done watching a video of Charleston White with Jason Lee, who's mulatto, Jason Lee. And Charleston White even said that, man, I've never seen a yellow mixed kid commit any harmful acts in society. I've never seen it before. And I watched another podcast where a black guy was bragging about how dark-skinned kids were evil and this and the third, but he was making it like it was a good thing, and the light-skinned kids were more peaceful. But like, where are these? I don't see the proof that you guys are saying. I don't see mixed kids turn up the environment, being destructive to their environment. I don't see mixed kids who are angry. I don't see mixed kids who are underperforming in schools. Like, if you compare them to the black group, the dark-skinned group specifically, who's more violent between the two? I'm pretty sure that everybody would say the dark ones. Who performs well more on test scores? The mulatto kids would. Let's be real. Even in sports, they can do the same thing that you guys do, even better. If you see you guys get outperformed in different sports by these mulatto kids. These mulatto kids is out rapping black kids. Like, so where are they getting this from that these mulatto kids have all these issues? I don't see it. Even when I look back, the most innovative kids throughout American history have been the mulattoes. So like, where is it?
I like that this guy somehow thinks that because the lighter skinned blacks somehow have an advantage. I don't know what that advantage could be as far as an intelligence and disposition. I wonder what he thinks would happen if you went all the way to the other end of the spectrum and became white? Or does this stop there? It's kind of funny just to think about the fact that, like, just that idea in his head hasn't been fully, like, captured.
They getting this these ideologies from. It's actually the black kids who suffer from, it seems like, from different spiritual issues, as far as violence and sexual degeneracy and depravity and mental issues, and etc. But I don't see where they're getting this from. Like, it's not based in reality.
Statistics that you can Google, and it'll pop up showing you that mixing races and sharing cellular structure and DNA with a people that's not a part of your tribe, it have not only an intellectual deprivation from your mind, but it has a genetic mutation on the cells of the body. And your teacher, your great teacher, Dr. Sebi, taught the same thing.
Dr. Sebi wasn't even black. He wasn't even a black American like allegedly you are. I don't even know if you're a black American. They are not even the same group. But let me listen to all this. A lot of stuff is Mr. Disturbed. It's bugged out. They're just making stuff up to shame mulatto people. And the scriptures do say that the Most High does prefer you to be with your own. But the Most High is not against race mixing. Like, you have to know what time period you in and all type of stuff.
I think I just decided that my next deep dive that I'm going to start in, like, understanding is like the actual, like, Black Israelite kind of, like, I do have a guy that I'm subscribed to that I've been kind of pushing off, and he's kind of like I think Jared said what was it that you said that guy was? Sufi? Is that kind of like Black Israelite? I don't really know too much about that.
And a lot of the scriptures have to mesh up with the time period that you in. All right. And the reason why the Most High says to try to stay with your own kind is due to and he was specifically talking to the children of Israel to stay with other Israelites, because he didn't want the Israelites to worship other deities of the other nations. So when they would go off and they would dwell, especially the men of Israel would go off with other nations of women, they didn't want their offspring to worship their deities. All right, but a lot of this stuff is not based in reality, and I see how the next this is bugged out, but I see how the next one. You can make the argument like he's claiming. Well, he's trying to make an argument that mixed kids are confused and this is that and the third, but nobody's more confused than black people. Let's be real. You know, one minute you guys are Israelites, one minute you guys are, Indians. One minute you guys are all over the place. One minute you believe in Christ, and next minute you a gangster rapper. You seem like you guys are going through more so an identity issue than the mixed kids are. So this is not really based in reality, what these people be speaking about and talking about.
Mixing.
Sorry. All right. What was the other thing I was going to go into? Oh, Cock Launch. You wanted to watch this hilarious video right here.
America is the heart of modern civilization. This story will surely change your mind. There, a trade in unwanted children exists, and the way they do it is distressing. It's known as rehoming, and when parents decide they no longer want their adopted child, they simply advertise them on websites to lure prospective new parents. It's a straight...
I think I saw in America that there was like a bunch of like foster homes run by the Chinese. I don't remember if this was connected to that or not.
Forward as getting rid of an old fridge on eBay. There's no vetting or court orders required. And these disposable children can be handed over to anyone. In fact, until you see it, it's difficult to believe. And we should warn you, it's quite confronting.
Alicia.
Oh, yeah, I remember this.
Alicia is a very
Oh, God. Where did we start? I remember this. Oh, God. My cup is only half. Oh, Jesus Christ.
special and very sweet young lady
God.
who is looking for her forever family. She describes herself
It's a parade
as
like
honest,
no other.
helpful,
Abandoned children
also likes
desperately
drawing
selling
and
themselves
Oh, no. Oh, God. Do I have a seatbelt for this chair?
to win over a new family, a new start.
She also likes drawing and doing arts and crafts.
And in the audience, sizing them up to find a perfect match, are their potential parents.
Okay, Michaela, you look so cute. That is my girl.
Travelling to this so-called matching event today is Tom, a teacher with no children, who is interested in 14-year-old Frank, given up by his adopted family
not
2 years
Frank.
ago and now living in a
Frank.
care home.
Today is important because I get a chance to kind of be a part of something, you know, a part of a family that I've been waiting
Oh,
to be
he's
part
a
of
good
for a very
one,
long time
too.
now.
If something happens, then we'll pursue it, and if not, not a big deal. Nothing gained, nothing lost.
But Frank is anxious to make something happen. He has much to lose and only 2 hours to convince Tom he's worthy of adoption.
I'm trying to show him the brightest aspects of me and to let him know what the darkest ones are.
Well, the darkest one there seems like to be Frank.
Frank has sold himself well. Tom agrees to give his new son a trial run and will collect him in 15 days' time.
Thank you. Do the same.
But 6 months later, Tom decides they're not compatible. And again, Frank can only hope and wait to find a family who wants him forever. To see those children trying to sell themselves, to find a forever family, what does that do to your stomach?
Oh, it turns it. It is appalling that we get to a place as unseemly as this. Appalling.
It is.
I should. God damn it. I should set up like a heart rate monitor and a blood pressure thing. Just like somehow hook it up to like a little screen on the computer here, so you can just watch my fucking heart rate and my blood pressure just skyrocket.
Is distressing, tragic, and completely legal.
Oh.
Here in the US, it's a phenomenon known as rehoming, where
Rewind and look at the last guy. Dude. Oh my God. Oh. Oh, I would rather do 200 push-ups than keep watching.
where, along with matching events, troubled kids are advertised like goods on eBay and
God.
given to anyone who'll take them. Mostly they're adopted and often wear the scars of abuse and neglect. Most disturbingly, their parents have decided they no longer want them.
Jesus, dude.
It could be here in New York City.
Here in New York, it could be in Boston.
For Adam Pertman, from the Boston-based National Centre on Adoption and Permanency, rehoming is the heartless result of desperation.
Desperate people do stupid things and desperate things. There should be legal structures and social structures.
I feel like there's a giant dog park in like Central America that I found out about Steve-O, like through Steve-O, where like they just release all these dogs into this giant like field and like forest, and they all just cohabitate and mingle. I feel like if you did that with these kids, they would be significantly better off.
And professionals who know what the hell they're doing around all of this. If we don't protect vulnerable children, who do we protect?
It's an underground trade in children that could be happening in any suburb across America. It's estimated that there is something like 24,000 foreign adoptees who are no longer with their adopted families. And as we've seen, there are countless more waiting to be rehomed. To rehome a child here is breathtakingly easy. Parents who no longer want their kids simply sign them over to those who do. And that could be anyone. A desperate, loving parent in waiting, or a monster.
I was at work today, and someone said something about they just wanted a nuclear holocaust to happen, and I just I almost got myself into trouble in front of my boss. I said I'd be fine with just a regular holocaust.
I think it's often that the child doesn't meet the expectations of the family. And so instead of working with the child, they're trying to rehome them.
Get rid of them.
Dispose of them.
Megan Exxon has 5 adopted children, 2 through rehoming.
Look at the little girl in her ballet costume with her flower in her hair. I don't know how you can give a child up.
As well, Megan is all too aware that not everyone who seeks out these children can be trusted. And what about the people who might be looking at these photos? Who might they be?
Well,
I think I know who's looking at those photos. Oh my God, dude. Oh God, we're only a third of the way out. Oh God, I'm gonna die.
it could be anyone. We know from experience it can be pedophiles and people who are liars and cheats.
Well,
I think one of those out of the 3 stands out a little bit more significantly than the other 2 that you just listed.
this is like a shopping list for a pedophile.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
17-year-old Poppy knows the awful truth through first-hand experience. Like an unwanted pet, Poppy's former adoptive parents rehomed her when she was just 7 years old. They delivered her to Nicole and Calvin Eason, a couple they met in an adoption chat room.
I kept getting recommended all these cop videos like several months ago, and there was this this continuing pattern of these videos of these lesbians that would go and lock kids into rooms and then manufacture these alarm systems so that if they tried to escape. I remember in 10th or 9th grade in high school, we had to read this book called A Child Named It. And it was the most awful thing I've ever read in my life. And my teacher fucking, God, why would you make me rewind this? 10 seconds is Jesus, dude. God. Oh, I feel like I'm in Dragon Ball Z when they're training and everything is going a minute is a year and I'm just training and this feels like hell. I feel like I have 10,000 pounds on my shoulders.
Pedophiles.
What the fuck is on your neck? What the fuck is that? Do not tell me you're smoking and you have a hole in your fucking neck. he has a fucking hole in his... Oh, these are the worst people I've ever seen in my life.
Here, Nicole is caught discussing rehoming.
A family looks for another family, internet, word of mouth, friends.
And her not-so-gentle approach to parenting.
I smack them in the mouth, and I've gotten them with a spatula. I have no regrets about it, no complaints about it.
The day that you were sent to the Easons' home, what was that like?
Scary.
What was scary about it?
Being dropped off by people who I thought that were family and not being able to see them anymore.
So this was your mum and dad, who you considered to be your mum and dad.
Mm-hmm.
And did you understand why you were being sent away?
No. I was told that we were going on a little road trip, and that's all they told me.
This Haitian girl that I almost married told me about, I don't know if you guys know about, how the Haitians and Hillary Clinton, was trafficking people through the Clinton Foundation. And I starting to think that she was part of this shit. The stuff that she told me about, the hell that she came over here and experienced, it's so surreal because it's such a weird thing, like fate of God, where when I was little, I grew up in Miami, and my parents took me to this private school, Montessori school, and then I ended up meeting this girl in college in my psychology class, and this is such a weird thing that just it's such a weird coincidence. I told her about how I went to this school in Miami, and then she showed me where she used to live after we had been dating for a long time. And then she actually lived in this fucking house that was infested with rats. Literally, there was a train track behind the expensive school that I was going to, and then her house, and the hell that she was experiencing. It's so insane, the dichotomy of that, when I would think about it, just everything that she experienced while I'm just my parents are paying all this money for me to go to a school where at one point we weren't allowed to play Power Rangers because too many kids in the news were getting hurt. And this girl is suffering ungodly, horrible thing.
Poppy and another child from another family, 14-year-old Dimitri, would now experience the very worst of rehoming. What happened in that house?
Yeah, that's good. Make sure you make her relive this. I'm sure she loves telling this story.
A lot of things that shouldn't have happened.
How would you describe the Easons?
Scum, uncaring, heartless, self-serving, selfish.
Lynn Banks, an adoptive parent herself and a crusader against adoption scammers, uncovered the Easons online and was immediately alarmed. Did you spot that it was a fake as soon as you saw it?
Yes, they were trying to take kids into their home under false pretenses.
This shows how easily the Easons con people. This document is meant...
Hold on, let me go and copy this so I can go and print a fucking copy out.
...to reassure parents who no longer want their children that they've given them to the right people. It's a safety assessment signed off by social workers. But the Easons was pure fiction. When you became suspicious of the Easons, did you become obsessed with tracking them down and stopping them?
It was the right thing to do. And I couldn't turn around and walk away from that. You know, who else was going to do it?
Lynn discovered the Easons' own children had been removed from them due to neglect and suspected abuse. She told police, as the Easons moved across the country, of the kids they collected on the way. How similar was the story from state to state?
Very similar. They were doing damage they weren't getting caught. They were free to move on.
Can you explain to me how Dimitri and Poppy were placed with the Easons?
Well, I mean, they met on our group.
Megan Exon ran a chat room set up to support other adoptive parents. Unaware of their background, she welcomed the Easons and introduced them to the other families.
This is the horror, too, is that my wife and I have discussed about possibly in the future adopting kids, but the other thing that you don't know about these kids is like you want to take them in, but you don't know what they've suffered. And so like you're unfortunately putting your own children at risk if you bring some kids in. Like there's a kid that's down the street who this woman is fostering, and she's at least she's nice. But just like this kid is really, really messed up. Well, he's not that messed up. He's not the worst one. But you can see that like when he came over to play with our kids and the neighbors' kids, it was just like, I hate to be mean, but it's like you have like like your dogs, and then like you're setting up like a play date, and then all of a sudden like you're at the dog park and someone brings in a pit bull, and it's like, oh my God.
But tracking their every online move, Lynn alerted Megan immediately.
Well, I know for a fact that she has an 8-year-old and a 14-year-old from our group. We introduced them.
Just 2 weeks before this call, Poppy and Dimitri's parents had dumped them with Nicole and Calvin Eason. Lynn's phone call was confronting and devastating.
A pedophile? Is this Calvin?
Now I know who that guy looks like. He looks like Neil deGrasse Tyson.
After having that conversation with Lynn, what did you do next?
The first thing I did was I called the parents, and it had urine in the front.
So you go up to the door and you meet a fairly imposing man, I'd imagine. He's 6'2".
Yes, I'm 5 feet tall. I just said, I'm here for the children, and he said, well, you can't have them. And I said, no, Calvin, you can't have them. You don't have a right to them.
Lynn describes that decision as very brave. Do you feel brave?
No, I feel stupid.
Why is that?
Because I helped put them in that position.
What did you think of somebody coming and rescuing you in that way?
I thought she was a hero of what she was doing.
You thought she was a hero? Especially a 7-year-old abandoned child.
She was certainly molested. Nicole and Calvin walked around naked. They wanted the children to sleep in bed with them. They had the children watch pornography, and as though it were a family movie.
So moved by Poppy's experience, Megan adopted her, and Dimitri found a family too. Although she was now safe, for a long time, Poppy blamed herself for being dumped by the people she knew as her mum and dad, who she could only recently face again. So you met up with your adoptive parents, your first adoptive parents. What was that like?
I felt guilt that I did something to them to make them do that to me, because I didn't understand why. She told me she didn't think that she was capable of taking care of me anymore.
Have you forgiven her for not coming and rescuing you?
Not quite yet.
Incredibly, even after Poppy was saved, the Easons continued rehoming children. It took Lynn Banks nearly a decade of collecting evidence against them before the FBI acted. With the aid of her testimony, 2 months ago, the Easons were each sentenced to 40 years in jail for their crimes against children.
I just can't imagine being in a home with them, you know, and I just can't imagine being a little person under somebody's control like that, and the people having their way with you, and I just can't imagine.
In all, Lynn's unwavering decade-long pursuit of the Easons resulted in 11 children being saved. Today, for the first time, she gets to meet one of them.
How are you feeling about seeing Poppy and Megan?
Yeah, I think it's gonna hit home now. Yeah.
What's hitting home?
Oh, they're real. Those kids were real.
Well,
Yeah.
look, she certainly is real, and here she is.
She is.
Hi. This is Megan.
Hi, Megan.
Oh, hi, Lynn.
Oh.
This is my daughter, Poppy.
Can I hug you? I'm so glad to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
I'm
Glad to meet you too.
To see Poppy in person is to be reminded of why Lynn did what she did.
I've wanted to do this for a long time.
To save precious lives from the most vile people.
I'm just glad you're safe. Yeah.
Let's go get the eggs. Come on.
Having found her forever family with Megan, Marty, and
I can't believe there's a minute left of this. I can't, like, this poor little girl. Oh my God, dude. I just want to set these people on fire.
and her 4 adopted brothers and sisters, Poppy has been given a chance to live a life she deserves.
What do you think of adults who are able to leave their children with strangers, who can just leave a child and walk away?
They're disgusting and they don't deserve kids themselves.
Do you think rehoming should be allowed in this country?
I hate that everybody's in that position. I think it needs to be regulated so that it's safe for the kids. But the child needs to heal from the rejection and the abandonment and the trauma. They have every right to walk this earth healed.
We should make these kids the leaders of our government, and then whatever they decide is just law, and then each of them just gets a township, and they could just be like complete dictators, or like I bet you they would have some proper solutions instead of just like regulating it by the government. I think whatever solution they come up with for society would just have to become law.
Oh. That's it.
Well, thank you, Mr. Cocklaunch, for that extremely funny video. I appreciate all the laughs and giggles that we had together. This is this is an excellent stream, and I'm glad we started off here. What can I say? I just wanted to revisit this. I found this in my liked videos, and I just kind of want to revisit this. I'm not going to watch the whole thing. I just don't want people to forget, especially when I was watching, like, recently today about the attack on the Russian air defense bases, and it made me think about, like, I had a chart that I got off 4chan of all the different, like, think it was like 21 or 41 different like bio weapons labs in Ukraine that were all targeted. And it just kind of reminded me of how like there's just these, you never know what's going on in these little warehouses that are around you.
Lab discovered in Reedley in March of this year. It's first important to remember what this community, our nation, the world went through for the last 2.5, 3 years. The COVID pandemic went on for nearly 3 years. It's commonly believed that COVID resulted from a lab leak out of the Wuhan lab in China. Worldwide.
Do you guys remember how insane that was? That you couldn't even say this shit? Like, just that there were people that would argue with you. And if you argued with them, you would just basically be sent to, like, the gulags. It's insane what we just went through.
There are 769 million cases of COVID that resulted in nearly 7 million deaths. In the United States, there have been 107 million cases and nearly 1.2 million deaths. In California, there have been 103,000 deaths. China's COVID-19 virus resulted in the destruction of lives, livelihoods, the economy, and business.
And the other thing that this reminded me of was around the same time in California, there was like some weird guy. I mean, weird is not really the proper description, but he had his own little lab where he had like, they had found like 200 plus fetuses in jars that I guess he was just like some backyard abortionist, and like in a little like warehouse like this, and it was just full of dead children, like aborted. Man, we really are off to a rough start today.
Children were stupidly locked out of school for 2 years and were destroyed academically, socially, and emotionally. People lost their freedoms, were forced to get experimental vaccines, to wear ineffective masks, and were lied to over and over by the CDC and government officials. Any of information that challenged the lies and the tyrannical mandates that were suppressed by social media. And we had officials locally that were silent and complicit with all the unconstitutional and destructive government orders. And now they're silent again. So what do we know about this lab in Reedley? Well, on March 3rd, the Reedley code enforcement officers investigated the site after seeing an illegally attached garden hose. On March 16th, the warehouse was inspected, and it was discovered that the lab was producing COVID-19.
That's so crazy that they were illegally attaching a garden hose, and that led to them finding an illegal COVID production lab run by the Chinese in Central California. Just like we had a little terrorism camp that was, I think, in Colorado or North Texas years ago that just kind of disappeared. And there was a bunch of children found there, and they were literally trying to like create little terrorists. Like, I'm so afraid to like find out who my neighbors are. Like, I remember I used to work on like independent shop like vehicles. Oh, it was New Mexico. Okay, and I remember being in like this like warehouse like rental facility, and you'd have these neighbors and you just see them every day, and you really didn't know what all of them were doing. I mean, you'd see some of them working in their little like makeshift garages and rental spaces, but it really makes you think about like what's in every single rental space. Every time I go to one of those places, that's what runs through my mind.
There is blood, tissue, bodily fluid samples, and thousands of vials with fluids that are not labeled. They also found 900 mice, 200 mice that were dead. On March 16th, the representative from the company, Prestige Biotech, potentially a China national.
Isn't this basically what Unit 731 was? Right? It was 731, the Japanese concentration camp that they had during World War II, where they got caught. And so instead of just surrendering, they just released a bunch of rats infected with diseases and covered in fleas that were covered in diseases. This is insane that this is just out there.
Informed investigators, quote, "These mice were genetically engineered to catch and carry the COVID-19 virus," end quote. Prestige Biotech, that company, is licensed in Nevada, not California. One address listed for this company is a vacant building in Las Vegas. Substack reports that other addresses related to this company appear to be in China, though this can't be verified at this time. And they also report that, quote, "Thousands of packages were found as well, many lab, and found infectious agents that were both bacterial and viral in nature." Some of these, Fresno Superior Court documents indicate that mice were involved in these experiments with COVID-19. The lab apparently illegally disposed of medical waste, and it's believed it went to the landfill. This can't be confirmed because the operators of the lab have not been forthcoming. Now, questions that must be answered and the public has a right to know. One, is this company from China? Or is it sponsored by the Chinese government? What was the purpose and goals of their experimenting with COVID-19 and having mice catch and...
You know, I used to get really paranoid when I was younger, and I may or may not have procured seeds or spores for certain biology experiments. And this is allowed to go on, and there's really nothing happening to these people.
And carry the disease. What were they doing with all the bacterial and viral infectious agents found at the illegal lab? Two, are the people that were running and operating this lab Chinese nationals or American citizens? If they're not American citizens, are they here illegally? Three, and most importantly, why wasn't the public informed of this illegal lab and what was found? The Fresno County Department of Public Health, it's public health, has an obligation to notify the public of potential dangers, both past and present. During the COVID pandemic, their medical officer held weekly press conferences justifying ineffective, destructive lockdowns and mandates, and yet not even an acknowledgement to the public of the illegal and potentially dangerous activities at the lab.
There was also just recently this week or past 2 weeks, I know that the story was kind of ongoing for the last couple months, but there was a former police chief in New York who just he was retired and working as a private investigator, and he was helping the Chinese. By the way, he only got 1.5 years in prison for this. He was helping the Chinese track down people that were seeking refuge in this country, or basically wanted, not even refuge, just wanted by the Chinese government. And then what they would do is, if they couldn't get you back, they would start telling you that your family back in the homeland was in danger.
So he spent a week having the media come, telling the public things that were not true, supporting all of the tyrannical, destructive things that were taking place in our city, our county, our state, our nation. And then when a lab related to COVID-19 is found 5 months ago, no word. No word from him, no word from the public health department, No word from the Board of Supervisors. Number 4, the Board of Supervisors are also silent. This is similar to the crisis when foster children were found to be sleeping on floors in offices. They only addressed it when they were forced to because it became public through the media. This is disgraceful and represents a willful decision to hide from and shirk their duties as elected representatives of, guess what? The public. They're responsible to the public.
Just wait. I wonder what this guy's opinion is of the fires that just happened. Boy, is he in for a big surprise when that happens.
These same Board of Supervisors were derelict in the responsibilities to the public during the pandemic. They were silent and complicit with all of Governor Newsom's destructive, unscientific lockdowns, mandates, and forcing kids out of school for 2 years. Now we have the same cowardice from the Board of Supervisors, and they're silent again when facing another crisis in the county, again related to COVID. The public has a right to know, what did the Board of Supervisors know about the lab, when did they know it, and why didn't they inform the public? 5, are there any current potential dangers to the public as a result of these experiments and illegal dumping of medical waste that involved COVID-19 and potential infectious agents that are both bacterial and viral in nature? Are there any potential adverse impacts to the farms in the area? How about the people in Fresno County or even beyond the local area? We know COVID spread around the world. How can the public be assured no medical waste was disposed of in our water systems? Number 6, were any safety measures in place at this illegal lab to protect the public from spread of COVID or the infectious agents they were experimenting with?
Oh, you guys want to know a creepy story? So when I was going to church, I had this couple after church, kind of like the female, they were younger my age, and all of a sudden, like, the girl came up to me and said that I reminded her of some Christian comedian. And so we ended up getting all hanging out and having lunch. And they told me the reason that they were down here was for some book fair thing. The husband was down here for a book fair, and it's just a big book fair. And I was like, I didn't really think much about it, but this was in November of 2019, I believe, before COVID happened. And then when we're having lunch, he starts telling me that he actually works on flu viruses. And I was like, that's kind of an odd thing to specify in. And he started telling me, yeah, like I really work on these like coronaviruses. I had no idea what that was. And the thing is that where I'm from, where I was at, is a very, very, very large research university for medical, very famous for it. And there happens to be quite a few Chinese nationals. In fact, they got in trouble recently. Even a couple professors were like indicted for basically stealing research. That always bothered me. Damn, dude. I totally forgot about that.
We believe COVID spread from the Wuhan lab, and it could have come from this lab as well. Number 7, Lemoore Naval Air Station is only 45 miles from this illegal lab. As was reported in Substack, quote, all of the F-18s for all the Navy's West Coast base carriers are located at Lemoore. The F-18s are primary strike fighters for the United States Navy. In a war with China, These are the aircraft that we would rely upon to sink Chinese naval vessels and give us victory, end quote. The implications from the spread of a debilitating virus could be devastating to our nation's military readiness. Is the location of this illegal lab coincidence or purposeful? Now, what do we do with what we've got right now? Well, according to Joe Prado of the Fresno County Department of Health, there's currently no requirements for any lab, licensed or not, to report to the local public health department the biologicals or the testing that is being conducted.
Also, I've talked about this, but probably a lot of you that are watching haven't probably seen me talk about it, and it's not any of my work. But there's a video and a channel called a guy named Memory Hold, like as in you're holding something, Memory Hold 5.0. And he has a really, really, really lengthy breakdown of this really weird, like 60,000 acres that was purchased and then was like secretly being developed outside of San Diego. And it's very, very creepy because the entire time Gavin Newsom refused to acknowledge it until it started becoming more and more public. And still, it's not really explained, but they were kind of saying that it was maybe like some kind of walled-in city for like military or elites. It's pretty creepy. I think he wrote the article on Substack, and I'm not joking when I say this thing is super long. He has a video on it. I think it's still up on his channel. It's probably about 2 hours long, and it's an excellent thing to check out if you're interested in this kind of stuff. But that just kind of reminded me of it. I think I'm going to move on to this lady that we were talking about watching yesterday, who was pretty interesting. And I'll show you. Yeah, Vince, you know, Memory Hold. He's got excellent videos. There was a video that I was watching of her where it's really wild to see the difference in like how intelligent she is, and then her going and basically like videotaping herself in a what she calls a bunker, surrounded by insulation and tinfoil on her head, sleeping and losing her mind. And it's just so weird to see. But before that, I just kind of wanted to show you guys something. It's a short video that is kind of interesting. We started, Dr. Katherine. This is called Meshtastic, and it's something that I started getting into this guy's channel called S2 Underground, and it's basically like a military intelligence guy that's sharing like secrets of like survival, and he's become a lot bigger as far as like basically kind of creating a news reporting network for people using what's that radio, ham radio. That's kind of how I found him. He did like some breakdowns, and then he started talking about this thing called Meshtastic. And one of the things that is he was talking about with trying to protect yourself, and if you know, hopefully it doesn't happen, is a situation where you have to communicate with people, but you don't want to give away your position. And so what this does, and he goes and explains it, is you get these what's called Meshtastic like nodes or repeaters, and you can transfer messages so that you're not pinging off the same spot, so it kind of looks like you're moving, or that like if someone's trying to track you And it's kind of interesting.
Welcome to my dining room. We're going to be talking about the Meshtastic mesh routing algorithm.
Because people don't really think about communication when they think about survival. All they think about is hunting and fishing, and that kind of stuff. But at some point, you're going to have to find out what's going on around you.
Algorithm. How that algorithm works in 1.2 and how that algorithm will work in Meshtastic 1.3 and 2.0. So let's actually just dive into this. So Meshtastic has a flood routing algorithm. That means if this is you and you send a message out, the devices within range will randomly retransmit that packet. So this one will send it off. Let's say this receives it. That'll be 1, 2, 3. All right. And, hopefully all the other devices that don't retransmit the packet will be in range and they'll receive it. So let's try this again. Again, this is all completely random. This is you. They'll send it off. 1, 2, 3. All right. And, most things within range will receive it. Let's send another packet. This is you. 1, 2, 3. And so it's just hopped 3 times, and hopefully the device all the way back there will receive it. Okay? So the problem with this algorithm is all devices are equal. It doesn't matter whether you're near, far, or behind an obstacle, you're all weighted the same. And so let's say this is you, and that all the way back there is your friend that you want to send a message to, unless something in between is there to relay the message, your friend is not going to receive the packet. So in Meshtastic 2.0, we've actually updated the algorithm to give more preference to devices that are on the edge of the network. So let's say this sends the message out. This device and this device, which are on the edge, will transmit it before anything else near the actual original sender. And because this will transmit it, that one back there will be sure to receive the packet. Okay.
What I found as an interesting use for this as well is that you can also send data. So really what you can do is, let's say all the banks go down and you're trying to use like a cryptocurrency or something, you can actually, send money through a network over to each other. And that was one interesting use for that.
Okay, so it prefers devices that are further away. So if this sends it out, you'll hit this one, and then it'll go back there into your friend. And what you actually don't see here in the camera is behind the rolls of paper towels are another node. In the original routing algorithm, it's very unlikely that those nodes will receive the packet because the mesh was constrained to a random order of devices. So in the new algorithm, it is a distance first. Again, if this were you, it might get to this one, you'll get to that one, and then it's possible for it to go even further out. So that'll give more preference for the mesh to grow bigger than it could have been before, giving it more range and more signal integrity. So how do routers fit into this? So let's say my beer here is a router. We'll put the router, I don't know.
That's pretty much all I wanted to kind of show you guys on that. I just thought it was something interesting. We had a couple shows ago had gotten our stream taken down because we were watching basically LARPing, and they were doing all the medical stuff and had guns and that. But that's a big aspect that I think a lot of people, and I never thought about how important it is. So without further ado, let's go visit Dr. Katherine. This, I guess, so she's experiencing a thing called machine gunning. I obviously, I'm very new to this whole mind. What did she call it before? We were watching where they were like reading your mind and all that stuff, or sending messages into your head with the microwaves. So I'm guessing what that is she's calling machine gunning, is being under attack.
Area. I had to reinforce it there to hear the shots coming down. I had to reinforce it here. This is my actual bedding area, and I set a rough layer of aluminium and actual foot protection here on top. Okay, so I'm sleeping on the cushions of the sofa. Okay, and then I am sealed in, and I sleep here like every day, and then I close these gaps like this with bin bags are filled, absolutely filled to the brim with aluminium. Okay, so I am sleeping like that, and already my wrist is being hurt. I was just saying that through gaps, they are probably shooting still in, but that's what this is for. And on the other side of the mylar is solid aluminium taped on. So this is, imagine sleeping like this under your desk. Okay, this is how Nazi Switzerland is.
Now, I kind of previewed this video a little bit for myself. And at the end, oddly enough, she starts basically, we were just watching that mesh-tastic thing, but she makes a map of all the places that she thinks she could be attacked from by her neighbors and all the different buildings.
Okay, the machine gunning is actually so insane. I am going to lie down here. See that my hand is here and is not touching anything.
And you guys want to go out there and save her? Is this one that you want to fix?
And meanwhile, you can hear the shots hit against that protection. So this seems to be coming in from the south. But occasionally they do hit my head. So I have to pull it down as much as possible to just protect my forehead.
I'm going to go and skip towards the end because this is basically just her recording her sleeping. But look at this map that she came up with. Black satanic goat placed after first murder attempt. Top 2 floors only. Line of sight corridor. Candidate homes with direct line of sight. At least 4 guilty as shots from all directions. Dr. Horton's home. I hope she didn't. Well, she doxed herself. That's not my problem. And police station refusing help since 2015. Oh, man. This is a wild life to live. And unfortunately, we haven't seen this woman post anything for 4 years. So I'm hoping she's okay. And then, then this one right here, it says this arrow right here and this arrow right here, lights on all night. All right, Mrs. Horton, let's listen to what you got to say. Look at that graph. The danger zone is as large as 50% of the shots, less than 50% of the shots. No, I'm sorry, around 50%. Okay. This is some wild stuff. All right. Let's go listen to what she's got to say.
Architecture. So those of you who are new to this series, we're talking about the intelligence agencies and the inner control architecture of our societies. And it turns out that sex and murder play a key role in this, as does mental illness, which is brought about by certain types of sex and murder. So this is the precursor, and you have to understand what we're up against right now. You have to understand this aspect. It took me some time to actually make this video because it's so important that people understand the architecture before they approach this topic, and it's very, very important that they also understand certain aspects of data analysis, things like selection biases and so on, because what we're dealing with here is so easy to misunderstand. So behind me the whiteboard is absolutely cluttered with things from previous episodes, and every single thing that's behind me, for example the organigram showing deep capture, takes so much time to actually understand. And really, well, it's probably very easy to understand by itself, but it takes a long time to actually develop an inner feeling and recognize it as underlying our societies. Similarly, the categorization you can see above me, splitting the entirety of society into normal people, if you like, then weaponized morons and psychopaths just out for their own self-gratification, is also quite, it's not the worldview that you would normally have. And then finally, next to me here, this tower of ecosystems, economy, finance, directed energy, weapons and corruption shows the tower of problems that we have, with the most urgent one at the top, which is the collapsing ecosystems, that actually relies on all the other ones, which is why it's a tower. So just like in a tower, you have to make a solid foundation before you can tackle the level above. So in order to be able to solve the directed energy weapon attacks that I'm also suffering from continuously, and whilst I'm also making this video, we have to solve the corruption in our systems. And these two are prerequisites to cycle finance, which is running out of control and has taken our entire societies ad absurdum. And then we can reset the economy, cycle the economy, and only when the economy is cycled towards sustainable and actually, sanity preserving ways of making money and running our, our sustenance, only then can we solve the biggest and key problem here, which is the collapsing ecosystems, that can only be solved with a concerted effort and the ingenuity of billions of people together, ironically, and cannot be solved by a cull of people, as I was trying to explain in previous episodes, which is what the intelligence agencies are gearing up towards. So what's actually being prepared here is another staged world war. So some of you might know that the previous two world wars were entirely staged, entirely financed by American and London banks headquartered in...
Holy shit, Dr. Katherine is based as hell. Damn, spitting facts, Miss Katherine. one of the things that came to mind as I'm watching this, and she's talking about the ecosystem, and they had that whole thing going on about the bees being susceptible to Wi-Fi and bugs being interrupted in their processes by Wi-Fi. I wonder if certain people are actually more affected by this stuff than others.
Switzerland, amongst others, and then benefited the weapons industry and big companies, and they use this to take normal people like you and me and just shred them in this in this kill fest, in this absolutely sick pursuit of war. And by that time already, by the time of the Second World War, it was entirely staged. So both sides of the war were controlled, and only the top people actually knew how it all hung together. So even some generals were not aware of this, but this is how it is. So by now, whatever controlled the world wars at that time has now only grown bigger through globalization and the incredible money-making schemes and money printing endeavors that we had since the Second World War.
Remember, this video is 8 years old. Imagine what she would think of what's happening today, specifically this week.
War. So it's fair to assume that whatever is controlling us and would be inducing the next World War would be controlling all sides. So it would be controlling China, Russia, the US, Europe, any major player. So if we would have a third world war, it would be entirely managed and entirely stage managed and entirely staged, and a lot of people would die. That would be the whole point. And right now we have so-called leadership, which are cartel holders, who seem to be under the impression that we're too many people on planet Earth, and the only way to remedy that is to cull 2/3 of us, or some sort of ratio like that. And any systems analyst who looks into the complex human systems we have will very quickly realize that that would be certain death. So there are ways to survive World War III, but there's no way for anybody on planet Earth to survive killing off 2/3 of our people, for reasons to do with system non-linearity. But anyway, so this plan is really not practicable, and what it actually is a reflection of the mental illness that is at the very top of our organizations. So I already explained deep capture by clinical psychopaths who are, clinically insane. That's a naturally occurring phenomenon with pyramid organizations, and it will lead to an accumulation of psychopaths, quite a thick layer of psychopaths actually, when the organizations are particularly high, because they are sucking psychopaths from every point of the organization as they migrate up through their career structure. And also organizations that are particularly old, so they have many generations cycling through the system, leading to it entirely depletes the upper layers, frankly.
What she's saying is kind of interesting, because there's a certain demographic that's been around for thousands of years, apparently, and there seems to be a repeating problem of being removed from a certain society very often after they seem to gather their entire mass in concert. And at the very top, there's the people pulling the strings, and then there's willing fools at the bottom that think that they're part of this big group. And one of the things that's interesting about plants that I'm assuming transfers into people is that if you stress a plant out, it will keep that stress hormone in its memory for its offspring, whether you clone it or make a seed after it. I learned that when I was growing a certain devil's lettuce.
It will not be surprising to anybody who's worked in large organizations at all, but this is how it is. And it's not just companies that have this sort of psychopath magnet effect, it's any sort of pyramid organization. So it will be true of the UN, if you like, of governments and many other things, and certainly the intelligence agencies, for sure. So this is all part of the problem. Now you might wonder, what is missing? What's missing in this image? And especially because previously I already alluded to the importance of some sexual practices or sexual predilections. Everybody will be familiar with the operation of honeypots at the lowest levels here, and actually all throughout the ranks, really. So sex is very important in trying to lure people, trap people, trying to switch off their minds and make them make decisions based on other factors apart from just, you know, reasoned arguments. But it's much more important than that. I also mentioned pedophilia. Why is pedophilia so prevalent? Why are people who blow the whistle on pedophilia hounded with intelligence agency methods? Well, that's because pedophilia underlines the entire control structure. So when you have people at the very, very top who are all psychopaths and they don't really care, you have to have a very strong control mechanism to keep them in check. And the control files are the one way to do it, but the control files have to be very, very strict. So you can't just have a control file on somebody just because they're doing drugs or having an affair these days anymore. That just won't do, because, you know, doing drugs and having an affair is pretty much just fashionable if you're in government or anywhere else.
That's an interesting take to think about how when you traumatize someone from an early age and that you're keeping that trauma through generations genetically, and then also that ensures that the next generation, you have someone to replace these people at the top, and it doesn't matter if you're genetically linked to them. You can transfer that, basically that psychopathy.
So that's not going to do it. So you have to have something strict. So it has to be something like pedophilia, necrophilia comes to mind. Some people mention bestiality. Yes, you know, that would be also. And also serial killers. So, you know, people do get off on murdering people, sadly. And having a serial killer would also, you know, be suitable, in inverted commas, for this sort of current legacy system architecture we have. So it just stands to reason that as the psychopaths at the top compete and try to impress each other and try to scare each other off, it will just get sicker and sicker. So what you expect to find at the very top are, you know, corpse-loving pedophile serial killers, which is pretty close to what we actually find at the top. So, you know, the theory holds up, but it's much deeper than that, and there are other forms of sexuality that also play into it. And we have to understand it, to understand the data we have about the victims, to understand how to help the victims, and also to understand how on earth to cycle this legacy system, because this legacy system just isn't practicable any longer. So this is just a summary of all the things you need to have knocking around in your head as we are now approaching the next topic, the topic of sex and murder. Another aspect that also feeds into it is what I discussed last time, which was monarch programming and MK Ultra, and there were so many programs named differently but doing pretty much the same thing, which is through trauma try to compartmentalize the brain. So mind-shattering sort of programs whereby you would traumatize typically a very young child severely by showing them murder and corpses and something that they would really be traumatized by extremely, and do it again and again until what the brain seems to do, as far as I understand, is put up firewalls to be able to just operate normally. So it would compartmentalize trauma away from normal brain functions. What it does is it seems to create a safe space. I mean, you wouldn't think it's a safe space because that's where all the trauma goes, but that's what the brain does. It tries to contain it all in the safe space. It's like putting a concrete casing around a nuclear power station. You know, it's meant to be safe inside, you know, keep everything inside. That's what your brain seems to do as well. And it does it such that it only accesses that bit of the trauma and these, the upheaval when it has to. So people cottoned onto this, and they discovered that they can program or condition in certain behaviors into young children, and then have certain access modes into that, compartmentalized area, which could be anything. It could be words, it could be tones, it could be, certain colors, sequences, and many things. And because the brain tries to really isolate that area, as a result, the paths in would be extremely specific, and the brain would only allow, access into that area for safety reasons if it was really necessary. If it's, you have to understand what the brain actually does, first and foremost. It tries to prepare you for what you have to tackle, in dangerous situations. So when you have things like trauma, the brain tries to prepare you handling this sort of very stressful situation. But it doesn't want to just fire any old time, but when it does, it will be fully there. So if you train a child, it seems, under extreme trauma, the brain will have a very strong trigger, because it will be a safety mechanism. Whatever behavior made the child survive that trauma will be played out again, hoping that it will survive a similarly an equally stressful situation again. So what you will end up with is in the brain of a child a sort of safety area that is highly inaccessible for safety reasons, but when it's triggered, it's very strong. So people notice that with Monarch programming and MK Ultra, you can create certain states in people whereby they're highly obedient to their programmers, their trainers, because it would be a survival mechanism. So they would be, they could be induced to do extreme things, and they would just do it. They would just follow the instructions, because the brain is in an emergency mode. And again, that would be done with different form of trauma, and pedophilia comes into that, traumatizing children through rape, traumatizing them through making them watch the murder of other children, and so on and so on. It's horrific stuff, and this is already where sex and murder are tied together. So all of this, goes into the Monarch programming. And again, you would, as I explained last time, you would have to have very strong controls, even beyond the control files, on the top level people, which has to be something like Monarch programming or something comparable, because you will be dealing with psychopaths who might not even care about their control files. Remember, they are impulsive, they don't have remorse, and they don't give a damn about you. So you have to have something hardwired into their brain. So this is why Monarch programming at the top level of, say, the intelligence agencies or the military, or equally, dangerous and powerful places, would be an ingredient. So the previous generation will try to control the next generation to, make them just obey rules. So you end up with these organizations where at the very top everybody's a frickin' pedophile and, Monarch programmed and totally whacked in the head. And this is why, because at the very top that's the only way to have control. So, okay. Now also I'm inviting actually comments and suggestions and help, because things like Monarch programming and trauma pervades the upper parts of all these organizations, and they will have tentacles reaching down all the way, because this person would want a slave and this person would want a slave, and so on. So actually Monarch programming and trauma-based mind control, pedophilia, rape, and any sort of trauma and control of others will be pervading our society. So there will be millions of people exposed to this, millions of people suffering from it. And if we really want to cycle our legacy systems, we have to find a quick, reliable, and good way of cycling out of that as well. Which also means somehow undoing all the sex trauma, all the Monarch programming, and so on. And there are several ways to do it. If people remember what has been done to them, it means that the brain builds a bridge in, so you don't just have the the safety, the emergency entrance in. Your brain suddenly starts to have other links in. It's like dismantling the concrete.
It's interesting that with psychology, like being kind of a not an actual a social science that kind of emerged in the last 200 years or so under that name. But this phenomenon has been occurring for as long as history has basically been written. I would assume that you can basically find good examples of this in the Bible and other ancient texts. But it's interesting that it only has kind of a name now. And I'm wondering if beforehand, or if this is like a secret knowledge, how, because like now we can spread information between each other so much easier. And I'm wondering how many texts and stuff like that have been written about this and handed down in controlled populations through this kind of basically traumatic events.
Around the nuclear power station, so you dismantle the compartmentalization by allowing your brain to mull over the events in different moods, in different sort of ways and lights, and having, most importantly, more synaptic connections to that, and then you can digest, you can break it down into small bits. So this is why remembering it helps, because suddenly you will have build lots of synapses, and it will not be a compartmentalized thing, so you've got much more control about how you behave when you're entering that. And then the question came, how are you going to remember it? Well, some people can do it with drugs. I do not recommend using drugs. It might be the quickest way, because what you do is chemically just flush your brain. So, it might be firing in all sorts of ways, and therefore also access this sort of area of your brain, chemically induced. I'm sure you can also induce it electromagnetically with all the mind control weapons, but either way, I don't recommend these methods, because you would not be in control. You would not be in control. You would be at the mercy of these chemicals, so or at the mercy of somebody else.
That's why, so I'm very familiar with the basically mycology of psilocybin and psilocin and what people call magic mushrooms. And it was something I wanted to go to school. Well, I started to go to school for, to be a mycologist, because I was so interested in it and the effects that I had when I first started them. And then it's kind of a weird turn for me to be so against them now. And then now seeing them advertised, as places like Twitter and stuff like that, where people are basically relying on this stuff to microdose. And I'm sure there's people that watch me that are fans of doing that. But I'm very, very cautious, especially I was watching, actually coincidentally today, Sam Tripoli had this guy, Adam Schnell, his basically runs a company that it's a sponsor of Tinfoil Hat. And it was basically a 2-hour advertisement for this guy's like microdosing mushrooms and shit. And it really kind of made me sick to listen to, and lose a lot of respect for Sam Tripoli for kind of, what was the guy's company called? Something Brain, Alpha Brain, or no, not Alpha Brain, but it's really not a good thing that I think that we're pushing this onto people to start using psychedelics regularly.
Zapping your brain. And really the best way to do it is through resonance. So there's a way to make your brain tackle, injured parts of your brain and traumatic memories. And that's when you're perfectly at ease and when you're empowered. And that's why I was talking about trying to learn about yourself, what you resonate with. Do you resonate with music? Do you resonate with other people? And then, get into that mood and then when you're perfectly happy and you feel perfectly safe and perfectly empowered, that's when your brain will naturally go and do repair work and find itself actually where it has to go to do that. It sounds incredible, and it takes a lot of going into yourself and finding this resonance point, but it is the safest and the best way to do it. And the reason why, it's because your brain would only take as much as it can chew, okay? So you would not be flooded with this trauma, but you would actually, you know, in a lasting fashion, digest it, break it up, come to terms with it, you know, find a way to, you know, redefine it and then move on. So I bang on about this because this is so important. Right now we're stuck. I'm a victim out here, you know, I am being held down by a bunch of gang stalkers and degenerate thugs in the intelligence agencies who are mutilating me to death with their mind control, you know, experiments with their nanoparticles. My head is being irradiated and shot into non-stop in my home. They cooked me out of my home this week. I had to flee my own home several times because the irradiation is so insane, and they shoot, you know, microwave weapons in, and you think, how can normal people become so insane? And then you realize, to understand the insanity, you have to understand the sex and the murder, and for that, to understand that, you have to understand monarch programming, and to understand that, you have to understand deep capture, and yada yada yada. So when I went through that, you know, and I finally understood, now I'm trying to, you know, go back to the beginning and bring everybody back and make them understand what we're dealing with by going through these steps. So it is very important that we find ways to diffuse the monarch programming, okay? And at the end of the day, what it's in the best situation, you can diffuse it. You can diffuse it. You will still be left with a certain state in your brain that is fundamentally different because it's pretty hardwired by that time. But it is like as if someone had just built an attic in your home, or an extra room. Let's call it the panic room. Someone built a panic room, okay? And you know, the way they built it is if you go in there, there will be just knives and guns, because it's all about self-defense and fighting and killing other people and this sort of stuff. If you don't like it, you know, by the time you found the entrance to your panic room and you found the key and you can go in at your ease, you can just open the door, look at all those weapons, those knives and balaclavas and machine guns that someone put there, and think, I don't need this. And get rid of it and clear it out and put something else inside instead. It really works like that. So for the people, there are people who actually went through this, it can become your own panic room, but it has to be yours. You choose the keys. You choose the keys to access that room. And when you go in there, you're safe. Okay? You're not in war mode. You are safe. And you can get there. And it is literally like, you know, opening some panic room someone built in your home, thinking, whoa, what a freak show. Getting all the junk out, which might take some time, and then refurnishing it the way you want. You know, you could put in a library, and it could be your quiet space when you're reading and contemplating, just away from the, you know, the rat race. It can be really nice as well. So there is a way to cycle out of these things, okay? But we have to talk about it, and we have to try many, many different things, because every person will require something else to find their panic room, should someone have installed something like that in their head, and they need lots of help. Just like DIY, you need instructions, you know, depending on what you want to do. So we need to open a discussion now, and we need to get going on this. So, and I know for sure, for sure, that the vast majority of agents in military intelligence certainly will have been put through something like that. So anybody from, you know, MI5, 6, the BND and the NBB who's listening to this probably knows what I'm talking about. And I'm talking to you guys and girls, because you have to sort yourselves out for us to cycle the system. Because remember, I want to be here. When you guys, you know, started your takedown operation, I was here, and now I'm here. Well, you know, really, I'm needed there, and I'm pissing around with your stupid corruption and your idiotic directed energy weapons, and I have to spell it out for you, so please, hurry the fuck up. But anyway, there we are. Okay. So, Now on to other forms of sex and murder. And so just to recap, the pedophilia we already discussed, that's for the control files. The child murder, the human sacrifice and all that sort of stuff, that's for the control files, okay? It's to generate the control files. But there are extra levels on top of that. And I want to talk about two aspects here, and I have to approach both of them. Yeah, I think one more carefully than the other. So let's start with the easier one, even though it's more heavy going. That one is easier to understand. So let's start with the pedophilia. Okay, so what on earth is the function of pedophilia? Because one of them was, as I said, to create control files, you know, on the people. But the control files go from the bottom all the way to the top. So at the bottom you might have just normal pedophilia. At the, you know, at the higher you get, the more it's about child sacrifice, because you have to prove your worth amongst psychopaths. So you have to almost out-psychopath other psychopaths, right? So it's going to get pretty sick. So this is how it's settled on the child sacrifice and drinking children's blood and all this disgusting psychopathic nonsense that you hear from the Hampstead cover-up in the UK, from the Dutroux affair in Belgium, from Pizzagate in the US, which by the way stretches the globe, you know, from other reports about pedophilia in the UN. I think Alex Jones talks about that, you know, and that was his point about focusing too much on Pizzagate. He says, oh, it's actually much, much bigger. Yes, because it is the control architecture. It's the staple. And this is just the pedophilia. We haven't even talked about the serial killings, okay? Well, in the pedophilia you have serial killings as well, but there are many more serial killings, you know, as well. So anyway, that's what we're heading for, unfortunately. Yeah, you can see it's heavy going. But now what's really, really important is to understand, you know, on one hand you have the control files, but pedophilia and also the mutilation of women with directed energy weapons, which is where I am. I'm being now shot into the head from my dear neighbors who have a satanic black goat which they put on their rooftop the day after my first assassination attempt on me.
One of the things that she name dropped just now, I was trying to remember what she was talking about. It's Dutroux. I'll spell it out in chat. That's a interesting thing that was basically really, really crazy, where like the I think this is the one where like a guy in the government was basically like kidnapping and selling children. Yeah. It was the authorities were all involved, and there was like really, really, really crazy. So that's something. It happened in Belgium. I would investigate if you're kind of wondering what she was talking about. It's kind of like we had our version of the Franklin scandal, and this one's a pretty bad. Like, I guess I don't know which one would be more sinister. It's pretty fucked up.
Near Luzern. So I've got the pedophile symbol, you know, the Masonic or, you know, whatever, Illuminati, whatever, they are all a bunch of goat worshippers. I can't tell them apart. So I've got that symbol there, and I'm being shot in the head with a directed energy weapon, and below the black goat there's a little flat where the lights are on at 3 a.m., 4 a.m. So that's, of course, the intelligence agencies, you know, trainee degenerate training hub, you know. It's there, and I'm being shot at from there. So, okay, what on earth is going on? So I am now in the mutilate women, you know, section of the intelligence conglomerate. And the mutilation of women and the rape and murder of children is all one. It is all one. Number one, it's the control files, but number two, it's something much more important. And that is actually goes to the very heart, and you have to understand that. Because I also said that what we're dealing with here are legacy systems. And I said that throughout the ages, these legacy systems were used to conquer countries. They are conquering systems. And in one of my videos, I have to look back which one it is, I made a diagram and I said how it's the one where, you know, the top stays at the very top, and I explained what the system inversion is, and how a system inversion, like promoting all the gang stalkers and so on above academics who work really hard, which is what happened to me, and promoting them above people of high integrity who work in their community, you know, all that is a system inversion that will make a system overall go down. Now, why would somebody want to make their own system go down? That's because someone else is doing that, someone external, okay? So what this is, it is a conquering system. You go in, you infiltrate a country, say, you know, typically it would be, in the olden days, it would be the kingdom, you know, of somebody, of some king or queen. You infiltrate it, you drag it down so that then you can come in with your system and conquer them. So you have to drag them down, okay? And this model, that's where the pedophilia comes in, is ancient. It's ancient. I'm not a historian, so I can't, you know, prove to you that it's going back to whatever, you know, ancient Egypt, but I'm pretty sure it does, because it is such a winning formula. So again, what it does is you are making control files, but you are putting, in a sense what you're doing is you're promoting people up whose top qualification for the job is that they're pedophiles. Not because they're brilliant at what they're doing. You know, if you've got two people and one of them is normal and is brilliant and the other one is equally brilliant but a pedophile, you'll take the pedophile. Now if somebody's brilliant and somebody's less brilliant but a pedophile, you will still take the pedophile, okay, because you've got a control mechanism over him. So already this is a system inversion. So overall you will push your system down, and it will happen again, it will happen again. And as you know,
It's interesting to note also that my wife was asking me about why they used to like ban gays or whatever, like the actual like reasoning, and what, you know, there's what the public understands, but then what the real true reason is that they're easy to blackmail. What's interesting too is now that homosexuality is more acceptable, now the blackmail is pedophilia. But that was one reason that they didn't like gays in the military, especially in intelligence, because it was so taboo that it was easy to blackmail. That's how, like, that was basically the foundation of the FBI and Herbert Hoover.
Entrepreneurs, for example, know one entrepreneur said category A people hire category A and B people. Category B people, as in terms of skill and performance, hire category B and C people, and so on. So they will hire people on their level or below. They will not hire somebody above them because it makes them look bad. So a boss is not going to hire a really clever underling because he will then, you know, feel bad. So that's what it is. And once you've put a pedophile in who's slightly worse than the brilliant person who you might have hired, well, your overall system sank down, but at the next level of hiring, you will only hire on his level or ideally below. So you keep, you know, ratcheting down in terms of performance in your system like that. So having pedophilia as a control mechanism is one thing, but it will automatically lead to a decreasing performance in your system. So you wouldn't want necessarily to do it with your system. You'd want to do it with somebody else's system, okay, before you conquer them. So you'd want to put in all the Satanists and all the kitty fuckers and promote them high up. I'm sorry about the word, but I just want to make sure that it's clear I don't have any respect for these people. So I'm going to use the most disrespectful language I possibly can, because that's what they are. So imagine, right, those kitty fuckers are promoted up into high levels, into high positions. They, you know, their biggest concern will be, of course, to rape children, you know, not to be amazing. And then you have, you know, degraded the entire system, and then you can come in with your conquering army, and because you're just faced with a bunch of pedophiles, you can just like clear the deck before midday. And that's the point. That is the point. So when you have this this accumulation of pedophiles, it also means that there's an external mechanism whereby a foreign entity is trying to take you over. So as soon as the pedophiles proliferate in the upper levels, you can already tell, aha, there is foreign infiltration and this foreign power is planning to take me over. Follow straight away. If the pedophilia isn't enough, you look to the women. What happens to the women? If the women are being mutilated and tortured like I am, right, it means again there's a foreign power preparing an invasion. Why? Because it's, and that's, you know, also psychological. When a foreign army invades a country, the way they can humiliate the men and show them that they have lost is to rape their women. It's this sort of impulse of, we've got the bitches now. We do whatever we want with them. You know, some, you know, will actually have their wife, their daughters raped and murdered, and it's this showing a man that he's utterly lost a war because he can't protect the women anymore. Okay, it's also psychological, it's possessive, you know, they're ours now, but it's just them being ours is usually not enough. They also want to destroy those women, they want to mutilate them, to show.
I joke with my wife sometimes about I'm wondering how close we are to people replacing playing music in their car and playing just straight up pornography, especially if we end up in vehicles that are driving themselves, and how often and frequent you'll just start seeing people playing that, you know, and you'll just see it through the windows.
Show to the other side that, look, we are desecrating, we are mutilating your possessions, the things that you love. Okay, so that is the story behind it. So now that I'm here in Switzerland, I'm not Swiss. Okay, I'm not Swiss, but I know for a fact that in Switzerland also Swiss people are being mutilated. In Germany, German people are being mutilated. Okay, and in the UK people are being mutilated. And Dr. John Hall says 70% or more are women. 70 to 80% are women. Now that is the telltale signature of war crimes and sexual violence. So automatically we can say it seems to be the case that there's a marauding horde in the West that is behaving, excuse me, like an invading army.
This is something that I remember discussing in philosophy. I'm sorry. This is something I remember discussing in philosophy about how when you go to conquer someone, like their country, there's three things that you have to do. You have to kill the men. You have to basically enslave the children. And then they basically rape the women. And it's kind of interesting the way that that's kind of formed into today's society, where like it's maybe not the way that those words are used, but let's say we've emasculated men. So basically you've killed them off. You've ruined women by like, it's not like the physical rape, but you've raped their minds into basically being so traumatized into actively killing their own children, being basically subject to being conquered by outside forces. And then you've got the children who are being enslaved, not just by the government, but just horrible like practices that will stunt their growth forever.
Because it is mutilating the women, predominantly. This is not human experimentation of what they want. Of course they test weapons on us, and they're testing weapons on me now because my head feels like it's being moved from the inside and it's burning, and I've got shots to my head from my dear neighbors. Yes, they're testing weapons, but then again they know pretty well how those weapons work. They know how their nanoparticles work pretty much, and now it's like the brain-computer interface. In a previous episode I explained why that's bullshit together with the Internet of Things, but I don't want to get into that. But it's not just human experimentation. That's what they tell their research scientists at DARPA, because even those people are just underlings. There's a bigger plan, and the people above, they do not give a damn about science. They couldn't care less. So the ultimate thing will be the biggest money-making scheme, which is asset stripping countries. To asset strip them, you have to pull them down to then come in from the outside, and that's what's happening. So the fact that I'm being mutilated here in Switzerland means that somebody's planning to take over Switzerland very, very soon. There will be very big asset stripping here in Switzerland, and in the UK, and in Germany. There's some sort of entity that's currently running a war, and yes, it is using the intelligence agencies of the country, of course, but that's what they always did. When they asset stripped Russia, when they asset stripped China, that's the London and American bankers, headquartered here in Switzerland, what they did is they used the intelligence agencies, but nevertheless it was a foreign power, it was foreign infiltration. Why would you always use the intelligence agencies? Because they're deep capture machines. If you capture the top, no one can tell because they're secret. Okay, alright? So, the mutilation of women with directed energy weapons and the rape of children, okay, so the mutilation of women, that's also used for sexual sadism fodder, so cashback for, the grunts and some perverted old farts, in your system, you kind of use it as cashback and they can get off and yay. But the ultimate thing is always, because senior psychopaths do not really particularly care, about, how to put it, the phallus of other men in the system. They're not going to cater to their, titillation just out of kind.
Yeah, this is the girl, actually, we were just watching her today about, when I first started playing her, I just played her being in a room with covered in tin foil, and what she was calling machine gunning, where she was being subjected to stuff. It's really interesting to see the dramatic change in how, her psyche is in that video versus, the in-depth knowledge that she's sharing. Because I don't disagree with really anything she says. She's very, very knowledgeable all about this stuff.
Kindness.
Oh, you don't have to worry about interrupting. You're just participating. And it's good that I kind of take breaks so I'm just not ripping off this lady's video.
Will have some sort of function for them, typically money-making scheme and power for them. So that's what it is. And the question is, what is the power? And this is it. It is the asset stripping of that country. Okay? That's what it's about. So now you see the close connection, hopefully, between the mutilation of women, that being a war crime, being sexual violence, and the asset stripping of countries, and also pedophilia, rampant pedophilia, being the precursor to a country being taken over. Now, from previous news reports, I think in the UK press, we already heard that previous, long ago, previous heads of MI5 and MI6 were involved in pedophilia, not just organizing it, which just goes without saying, but also consuming it. And that's, this entire architecture. And then
Also, you guys probably, I don't know, you might lose respect for me for this, but I used to be quite into the swinging world, and I started off as a single male. And what's funny is because I obviously, especially as a young testosterone-filled young man, I have quite a few stories, and I learned a lot about people through going to swingers parties. But the reason I got into it is because I didn't like hookup culture, as far as going on Tinder and then taking a girl on the date and knowing that I don't have any interest in her, and then just trying to like lie to her to get her in bed. So my thinking was basically there's going to be no feelings toward this, and that's the understanding of it at the beginning, and it'll kind of satisfy my sexual addiction because that's one of my vices. And I saw some wild shit. I've shared stories about it on another podcast. I'll tell those at another time, but I've really, like, just not even participating. I would kind of just go just so I could see and study people. I know it sounds kind of weird, but I learned a hell of a lot. And I learned to really, like, analyze people, and I could see kind of like, I don't know how to describe it, but I can really see into people. I can see kind of what makes them tick just from kind of seeing these people be their true selves. And it would be really everyone. Like, I've seen everyone. I've seen all kinds of people participating. I've seen high echelon people, just the lowest of the low, and you really get a grasp of like the human psyche from that. Yeah, I did have some fucking crazy stuff. No, dude, don't. I was just giving you shit about that, dude. You don't have to apologize. It was interesting, and it kind of ties into what we were talking about. But I'll make an episode of all of like the swinger stories that I have. It's kind of wild, especially from the different point of view when I did it as just a single guy versus like with a partner. So I'll let this lady continue.
Also, there are reports from all around the world, from that South Africa, you know, pretty much to absolutely everywhere, you know, to the US, to Australia, where, and certainly the UK and all these places, where you have also these rituals, you know, these kind of like, you know, rituals about the rape and murder of women and the rape and murder of children and so on. And this entire ritual thing, even if it happens as part of whatever you want to call them, the Illuminati, the Freemasons, or the Royal Arch Freemasons, it doesn't pissing matter, because what it is, it's a loyalty scheme, okay? The Freemasons and the Royal Arch Freemasons and all the Illuminati and all that jazz, what this is the top level organizing a bunch of gullible morons into their loyalty schemes, okay? So all this sort of, you know, the props,
and sorry to interrupt again also, is that's why I'm very open about my life, is it's very hard, you know, for you know, if I ever was in the situation where someone would try to blackmail me and be like, yeah, I said that in public, and maybe I'm not the most proud of it, but you're not going to use that against me. I'll tell you even more darker tales than what you're going to use against me. Like it's the best defense. Yeah, people are going to go and look at you like you're, you know, a disgusting degenerate. But I guarantee you that almost everybody I've ever met, especially going through that scene and that culture, has some crazy ass shit that they're not telling you about. And I believe in being honest, and a lot of people will even think that I'm lying just because of how brutally honest I am about disclosing dirty details about my life. And that's how you kind of beat this kind of system of them trying to, you know, use that stuff against you.
the mood lighting and the hoods and the whatever you might have, candles and whatnot, torches, and, you know, coffins, and yeah, that is just theatre. It is the razzle-dazzle to get all those stupid people in, to generate the control files, and then to get the heads of the intelligence agencies hooked on pedophilia to take over their country through them, to degrade the country through them. This is a conquering system. So somebody else comes in and conquers you, you know, by degrading yourself, you know, your entire stock of people. And if you think about it for a second, it's pretty obvious, because in the end, you'll end up at the top with a bunch of men who get off on dominating children. So how pathetic does a man have to become when his pride is not even dominating and impressing women, it's dominating children? And we're talking like 3 and 4 year olds and babies and stuff like that. Wow. I mean, that is taking a man and pulling him down to even below the wanker level, right? There are no words in the female vocabulary to describe tossers quite so pathetic, okay? So you have taken men and you've turned them into just detritus, human detritus, and then you...
I wonder if that's what Kanye is doing, is just basically like, after he goes and writes this song about blowing his cousin and all this stuff, I wonder if that's going to like be the safety net that he's going to start exposing other shit that he knows about. That would be a wild thing to think about.
You take that human detritus and you put them back up. Now that's the system inversion, right? You put them back up to lead MI5 and MI6, right? That's what traditionally happened, okay? It's in the newspapers. I got it from you guys, don't get upset with me. And also remember that the same will have happened in Germany, everywhere around the world, okay? Switzerland, US, everywhere. So I'm not just banging on about, you know, British intelligence before they sit there crying. So this is it. It is a system inversion, right? And you will have put the most, you know, the biggest waste of space tossers to the top of these organizations. You will have taken down the entire quality. So these people's top qualifications are now that they put their knob into little children before they murder them.
Jesus.
That is not exactly military strategy.
Well, Cock Launch, I think I may have outdone you with the brutality of this video. This is getting pretty brutal.
Excellence, is it? So that's their top qualification, and that's the whole point. You don't want people who are top in military strategy because you want to take over that country, okay? So you're using them to screw themselves, you know, to push them down, to take over. So this is the real, the bigger actual point in pedophilia. And it's amazing because you have these reports about the heads of MI5 and MI6 in the olden days, you know, and the historic pedophile scandals. I mean, reports that they visit all these things, and, you know, other reports where they're taking part in all these, like, weird fucked in the head rituals, you know, with the mood lighting and all that, and, you know, the whatever hooded, torched up Freemason, you know, eyes wide shut sort of thing. And you think you have really the so-called top of your, the creme de la creme, although I somehow don't really want to use that term in this context. You have those people, right, considered the top, going to these events, shagging children, and at no point do they just stop and have an epiphany. Like, it just doesn't happen. At no point do they think, like, literally, you have to imagine, right, the mood lighting, you I don't know what, in a chateau or a cave or something with torches and hoods and I don't know what you do, like, you know, mutilate and murder and shag children, okay. So you're busy doing that, you've got all these blokes around who are all like heads of the military and heads of military so-called intelligence and all these people and, you know, MPs and judges and all that. And then none of them, not one of them suddenly goes, guys, just a second. Sorry, Ted.
I think they can't let themselves do that. I was listening to Gavin McInnes, I think today or yesterday, and he was talking about these parents who transition their kids, and he made a good point, is like, you can't ever admit to yourself that you did this amount of harm to your child. You have to go with it for the rest of your life for your psyche, because otherwise, like, your head, you would end up like losing your mind. You know, that's really profound, and it ties into what she's saying.
Could you just take your knob out of that kid just for a second? Yeah, I know, but just for a second. I just thought of something. Guys, what the fuck are we doing here? Does that ever happen? Does that ever happen that they think, hang on, we are the top military leadership, we're all men, and we're fucking to you?
I'll say also something that really, really made me made me angry, that someone was laughing about. So I've spent a lot of time hanging out with veterans, and I remember this fucking guy at this bar that was like bisexual, and he was like fucking, his job was like ordnance for bombing, like artillery. And he got drunk, and he was like laughing about like blowing up kids and family, and it made me so fucking sick, man. Like, I fucking hated that guy so fucking much. And just like, that's just one person, and you think about like, that guy just is like at the grocery store with you, they're on the road with you, they're all around you. Yeah, I mean, he was gay, like flamboyant, and I really fucking just did not like him at all.
Olds. Does it mean something in terms of military strategy? Curiously, it doesn't seem to have happened at all for centuries. So these guys haven't understood what they're doing, right? They haven't understood what they're doing. What they're doing is not just shack children and accumulate control files, which is what they think they're doing, to climb up that, the shaft of Freemasonry, to the League of Dickheads, hopefully one day. No, what they are doing is they are taking their country down and preparing it for invasion. Alright? Military personnel fucking children is equal to invasion being prepared. Okay? Because it pushes them down, and then someone else, because think about it, you only need an army where your top leadership is not fucking children and you're on to winner. It's that easy, right? It is literally that easy, because you will have men of a totally different caliber, because their entire, self-worth and what they're striving for isn't just, satisfied with dominating a 2-year-old, and that's all you need. And that's exactly what is happening now. This is why I'm saying, as soon as you have the mutilation of women, with these directed energy weapons, as soon as you see the statistics, 70 to 80% women are being attacked, you think, that is an invading army. We have an invading army on our soil. Who could that be? That's it. Then when you hear the pedophile scandals, you think, oh shit, invasion being prepared. That's it. That's what it is. And the big business plan is to asset strip the West. It's to asset strip the US and to asset strip Europe. And if you want to asset strip Europe, you would pretty quickly want to come here to Switzerland. I was trying to make this point clear to a senior member, by his own admission, of the Swiss so-called intelligence agency in the military HQ in Bern, but that point was lost on the gentleman totally. So I hope somebody maybe who watches this video can maybe take a diagram and explain what I just explained to these people patiently. I think it would really help us. So it would certainly improve the national security situation here in Switzerland, which I think is a high time. So that is the importance of the pedophilia and the mutilation of women, and I hope you now understand how very, very important it is. Now there's a second aspect to this, another form of sexuality, and that is homosexuality, and that also has a very, very important role to play. However, this is now the most important topic to discuss because people will bend backwards to try to misunderstand, okay? And try to say that I'm homophobic or I'm trying to imply this and that. No, I'm not. So everything I'm going to say has nothing to do with homosexuality at all, and I explain why. But I have to talk about homosexuals because they're important systemically, okay? So what has homosexuality got to do with it? Well, homosexuality has at first is just a selection bias, as it turns out. It is just a selection bias, and people who don't understand data selection and data analysis can come to wrong conclusions very easily. At first it is just a selection bias, but it has devastating consequences for the system. Okay, so now let me explain what I mean. What I mean is the following. When people and historians look through, as far as I'm aware, through the, for example, the Gestapo and the Waffen-SS and all these militaristic, secret service types, they discovered, curiously, that it seemed to be full of gay men, okay? Militant gay men, okay? And then stupid people who don't understand statistics and data analysis and data selection will say, oh look, it's full of, gay men, therefore gay men are the root of all evil. No, they are not. They are not. What you have just seen is a selection bias. It is like, take for example basketball players, okay? Basketball players typically tend to be very tall. Why? It's because someone who's short won't last a day in the job, okay? Competing with tall guys playing basketball. So what it is that tall guys have got some sort of competitive advantage, okay? In basketball, it's their height. Now, when you're talking about things like the military, what you will end up with is that you have men, typically, right? Because it's the military, it's a very manly thing to do, and, involves killing people and lifting heavy stuff and running and all this sporty stuff. So men will have a competitive advantage. So that's why the military is mostly men, okay? And then within that, if you want promotions, it's not just women who sleep themselves to the top, it's also men. So I have an admixture of gay men, and men can sleep themselves to the top, okay? So as soon as you've got one gay man who's willing to promote maybe another man who's gay or maybe just wants to sleep himself to the top for career reasons, which also happens by the way, you will have this accumulation, right? So if he then promotes another gay man up because this person slept with him, you suddenly have this clustering effect whereby gay men are promoted to the top, okay? Don't get upset about gay men. It has nothing to do with gayness, okay? You see the same effect when you have, for example, large companies, and you have this weird effect whereby, women who are, kind of like, well endowed, will end up rising to the top, okay? So you end up with these like pussycat dolls in very close to the top leadership. Why? It's because the men at the top pick who comes up, and they want eye candy because they're just pushing paper around anyway. So, that's their perk, their job perk. So that's a pre-selection bias, and you will see it in most organizations, especially psychopathic ones. Now in the military, exactly the same effect happens. It is exactly the same. And as much as in most other systems, in all companies and governments and so on, you will have these, pussycats being promoted up because the guys like to sleep with them. In the military, where it's mostly men, you will have, you know, gay men being promoted up, and thereby it leads to a, you know, an accumulation of gay men at the top. Okay, now this is a natural process. Okay, so when you have the military or military intelligence and this sort of stuff, you expect to find a large accumulation of gay men just through that. Okay, that is what I mean. It is a selection bias. Okay, the system selects these people and thereby leads to an accumulation of a particular feature. Okay, so there are many other examples of that. And then you can also see how sometimes two things correlate because of this. For example, I think once, you know, statistic I read a long time ago somewhere, that was when you had people noticed that businessmen in the 19th century who were caught cooking their books, so you know, committing accountancy fraud, were also much more likely to cheat on their wife. And you think, what does one thing have to do with the other? Well, what it was is that if you wanted to, you know, you had a secretary who would enter stuff into the books, right? This could be a male secretary or female secretary. If you had female secretaries, because you wanted eye candy, okay, you'd have a female secretary, and therefore it would be much easier for you to cook your books and get away with it if you slept with your secretary, okay, because she would be in on it. So it was this sort of close cohesion that enabled or facilitated or made committing the crime much easier. Okay, and when you have thousands and thousands of companies, this plays out in all of them, right? In all companies or most companies, the boss thinks, oh yeah, well, you know, I'm married, but, you know, it would be nice to have some eye candy at work. So when
I wonder if that was a planned feature on top of, because it was around the same time that the FBI, with all of the gay stuff and the blackmail, came in. I'm wondering if the introduction of women into the workplace wasn't so much about getting tax revenue, but creating an unstable environment.
a pretty secretary comes along, he hires her, and then, you know, he wants to cheat tax and yada yada yada, and those who sleep with their secretaries have a much easier time to get away with it. Okay, so these are all pre-selection biases. You cannot say in reverse that any, you know, man who sleeps with his secretary is going to cheat tax or something, defraud the inland revenue, you know, or cook his books. It doesn't work that way. It works the other way. So once you sleep with your secretary, it's so much easier to commit accountancy fraud, right? Statistically speaking, we're talking, you know, small accumulations. But, you know, that way it works, but not necessarily the other way. Okay? So if you're not predisposed towards, you know, committing tax fraud, you're not going to suddenly commit tax fraud just because you have a hell of a time with your secretary, you know, at work, after work, whenever. So that is it. So you have to understand, you know, the actual mechanism behind this, and you have to understand selection biases in large data sets to get your head around this. So after all this, I want to go back to the, you know, the homosexuals at the top of the military. So this, because of this, number one, men sleeping themselves to the top, that leads to a selection bias. Number two, also, if you take the intelligence agencies, they were very secretive organizations, and they, you know, would be in sabotage and covering things up. So if you're gay and your profession is cover things up, that's brilliant, right? Because you can, it's compartmentalized, you can do what the hell you like, you can get away with everything, certainly murder, therefore also homosexuality. So the intelligence agencies were traditionally a fantastic place for gay men, which led again to gay men, once they were inside the system, thinking, oh, this is great, inviting other gay men in. So before long, you end up with MI5 and MI6 and also German intelligence and Swiss intelligence being basically gay outfits, you know, and it's just this pre-selection bias. Hence the joke in the last episode, you know, about Sir John Scarlett perhaps being the only straight in the straight guy in the village, being the only straight.
I wonder what it is that broke her. Like, obviously, because it does seem a little far-fetched for her to be being targeted and being so intelligent that basically her safety mechanism is wrapping everything in tinfoil. And it makes me think about whether all these people are truly experiencing all of these symptoms, but it's a manifestation of stress from knowing the darkness. And that's why it kind of breeds in like a lot of people that are low level that have been subject to horrible trauma, but aren't really at the higher echelons of society and experiencing the same thing. So they all truly are experiencing, these sudden surges of heat in their body from stress and dehydration, and basically psychological trauma. And I know that when I was kind of in my mid-20s and I was kind of struggling, I went to the hospital, and one of the things, they kept telling me I was just having anxiety attacks, but they would always give me an IV of like saline. And it's interesting to think about that, because when you're dehydrated, you kind of feel like you're very warm, and odd things start happening with your brain and your body, feeling different things going on. So I think that's another possibility of where this comes from. And also I am, I guess, open to how, they do have the microwave weapons, but it's very difficult to specifically target an individual, though, I'm not there making these weapons.
Guy in MI6, because traditionally these people were very heavily, gay. Okay, now when you have this and you understand how it comes about, that's now in reverse. If you then have rampant criminality and people are being mutilated to death with directed energy weapons by the intelligence agencies, and they are mostly women, it will add an extra edge. What it would be is that these organizations who are tasked with testing directed energy weapons and, trafficking women for the titillation of people in the establishment, for mutilation purposes, so that these people can live out their sexual sadist fantasies. Okay, so those gay men would be tasked with this, and then they would traffic the women and so on. That would be their day job. But there would be an extra edge, because if they are gay, they also are more or less self-sufficient and might consider women to be a waste of space. And they might, also consider children to be a waste of space. Well, because two guys together, they won't necessarily want to, they might, but not all of them necessarily want to have a home and raise children. So, women and children tend to go out of the window much quicker when you have these sort of situations. And therefore, again, to understand the sex ratio of the victims and why women are being mutilated so ferociously and so sadistically with directed energy weapons. And many people pointed that out to me by now, that they have met male and female victims, but mostly it's women, and the women are mutilated.
Remember I said that the other day, that it seemed like it was mostly women that were being subject to this, or like claiming they were experiencing it.
Ridiculously. They are mutilated to death. Of course, there's the other side where the men are just bumped off. They're just murdered, and that's it. And the women are, kept alive for longer because someone gets a kick out of mutilating them.
On the topic of mutilation also, and spreading trauma, it is interesting, the practice of circumcision, and that basically very early stage of life being subject to incredible trauma. I mean, that's one of the most sensitive parts of your body being mutilated. And I wonder how maybe, like I was kind of touching on, earlier in the stream about how long this knowledge has been there, and the role of circumcision in continuing this practice.
So that, ironically extends their lifespan a bit. So that effect certainly exists. But overall, you will be faced with a military or a military intelligence system full of gay men who think that women are just a waste of space, and they will mutilate them to death, like they're doing with me right now. Okay, so I'm literally receiving shots into my head as I'm talking, and I can hear cavitation pops in my head because someone is shooting microwave pulses from over there. And the Swiss police and the Swiss military police refuse to do anything. So now you understand why, because analyzing the system, you can be pretty sure that the Swiss military police is probably going to be predominantly a gay affair. Okay? It just is. It's just a pre-selection bias. There will be some straight men, but at the top I would expect it to be just mostly gay men, And that, if you don't believe me and you want to have victim testimonies, there is one. For example, the very detailed and excellent testimony of Kay Griggs, I think that was her name. And she gave very detailed testimony about military intelligence in the US. And it is just full of gays. It's just gay men who have some, alibi wives who they terrify and mistreat, but mostly they blossom when they're with their, fit young boyfriends. That's all these generals and so on that she's talking about, and military intelligence guys in the US. So the first time you hear this testimony, you think, whoa, how the hell can this be? Is everybody gay? Well, yeah, in those parts, because she was talking to people at the very top, very close to the cartel. Yes, those men are mostly gay. It doesn't mean that just because you're gay, you're going to be an evil bastard who wants to take over the world. No, because that's, again, doing the reverse, which doesn't work. The reverse logic does not work. As much as just sleeping with your secretary doesn't make you suddenly want to cheat tax, okay? So being gay doesn't mean you want to mutilate women and you want to traffic children and kill them. It doesn't mean that. And it doesn't mean you want to take over the world, okay? It does not mean that, and I've never said that, okay? That's the reverse that dumb people who don't understand data analysis and statistics will try to say, but it's not like that. It only goes one way. You first have the accumulation of gay men by a natural selection process, okay? And there's nothing wrong with that in itself. Then these gay men will be put through monarch programming, will be, traumatized, made to be hyper-psychopathic, hyper-aggressive. Then they already might consider women to be a waste of space. Then they're let loose on the women. And these, by that time, degenerate nutters, not so much because they're gay, but very much because they're monarch programmed and psychopathic, will be let loose on the women. And they will just shred them to pieces and not give a shit. And that's what we see. Okay? It does not mean that if you're a woman who's being attacked with directed energy weapons, you have to get angry at gay men. No. You have to get angry at men. That's all it means. Right? At men. First of all, the men who mutilate you, and second of all, the men who typically don't support you either because they're busy screwing children or because they just lost their balls somewhere and haven't found them yet. That's what it is. That's what it actually is. So, this is how sexuality comes into it. How does murder come into it? It's like, oh my god, murder comes into it at absolutely every stage. Because once you have built this sort of system, okay, what you have is total psychopaths who are trying to control other psychopaths, and these psychopaths only understand the language of threats and murder, okay? Now, when these people talk to somebody down here, they will try to talk the same language as they talk to the people here, right? To other psychopaths. So when you're a normal person, these guys, to control you or make you do what they want you to do, they wouldn't have to threaten you or anything. They could just ask nicely, and we could all do that. But asking nicely with these guys doesn't work. And because most of them are that way, when one guy comes in, he'll be just threatened, and if he doesn't do what he has to do, he's not going to be asked twice, he's going to be bumped off. Because if these guys are not listening, that's dangerous. They have to be bumped off. Otherwise, the other people, the other psychopaths think, oh, you know, the lead psychopath has gone weak. And then we can kill him. So, you know, that's why you have all this murdering going on in military intelligence and all this stuff. And when they murder, typically they will also be highly sexualized, you know. And if you don't believe me, again, I'll point you to evidence which will not make any bit of sense unless you know the background. But once you know the background, suddenly you think, ah, now I understand. So, if you don't believe me about the, well, here we are. Here's an example where you will understand. And this is, I mentioned this example before, but I'll mention it again because it's very important. I want you to look back at all the previous whistleblowers, some of whom were murdered, some of whom were not really whistleblowers but agents who were murdered, and there's probably an entire list of agents, and most of them I don't know about because it's not public. So I'll talk about the agents, the whistleblowers and agents who were murdered, okay? And there were several, and some they were just murdered and nothing further happened, but there were some whistleblowers who were maltreated and almost murdered, and then some non-whistleblowers who were murdered that are highly unusual. So the cases I'm referring to in terms of the whistleblowers, and now I said it before but I'll say it again, I want you to consider what happened to Chelsea Manning, you know, previously Bradley Manning became Chelsea Manning. He became a woman when he was put through this ordeal, you know, or maybe he wanted to be a woman already before, but anyway, he was in the military, he blew the whistle, you know, he's a total hero, he just revealed all this really disgusting stuff in the military, and then he was locked away, even though what he revealed was utter, degenerate, psychopathic criminality. So the people who were doing it need to be where Chelsea Manning is now, you know? Okay. But he also became a woman. Okay. And then he was put through hell. Now, also consider what happened. What happened to David Schuyler in the UK. Okay. He and his girlfriend at the time, Annie Mashon, Mashon, I never know how to pronounce it. So David and Annie, they were put through hell. They were hounded. They were gang stalked, terrorized, you know, actually they were put through exactly the same thing that all victims of the intelligence agencies are put through, myself included. And then in the end, their relationship broke up under this insane tension. David Schuyler, you know, I think had a breakdown or something, and, or maybe not, maybe he just had actually, you know, they called it a breakdown, but actually what happened is that he figured out the system. But either way, he's now, I think, also dressing as a woman. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm the last person to say that there's anything wrong with dressing or being a woman, you know. Then the third case I would like you to consider, in all of the cases I mentioned so far, there was just severe psychopathology in, you know, on the side of the military and the intelligence agencies. The other case that's very close to my heart and that I want everybody to consider is the death of Gareth Williams. That is hugely important, actually. And again, for those of you who don't know, as far as I am informed, Gareth was found dead in what is actually or what was an MI6 safe house. And he was found dead in a sports bag that was zipped. His body was in the sports bag, wrapped up in a fairly compact sports bag, wrapped up, zipped, with the handles, you know, folded over, the Velcro over the handles from the outside, and a padlock on the outside, and I think the bathtub was partially filled with water. And he was declared to have killed himself. Yeah. Well, Gareth was one of the math prodigies who died. But what was also interesting, I mean, if that wasn't enough, is that I think one article said that they found very expensive women's clothes strewn around his flat. Okay. Right? Alright, so first of all, of course, Gareth didn't kill himself. Okay, I mean, he was a freaking genius, but still, you know, if anybody would have pulled that off, it would have been him. But it's not really a math genius's way to go by showing the world how amazing he is by wrapping himself into a sports bag, you know, and putting the lock on seemingly from the outside. So that's not what happened. So Gareth was killed, spectacularly, in an MI6 safe house. But then what's really interesting is the women's clothes strewn around the flat. Okay? Now we can go back and we can think, you can just do data analysis on that and say, you know, you take the whistleblowers, and people become whistleblowers. They're not predisposed to become whistleblowers just because they want to become women, or because they are, you know, transgender, or because they cross-dress. No, they become whistleblowers because they've got spine and integrity, and that's pretty universal, you know. So that, becoming a whistleblower and witnessing something really shocking, has nothing to do with sexuality. And yet you have this high accumulation of people who've become women after that, in the phase when they were hounded, or when they were murdered, or they, you know, it was alleged that Gareth was cross-dressing, I think. That's so interesting, because the data sample that you select has nothing that would, you know, explain this accumulation of people or men showing female features. So what's going on? And then you put in the fact that, hang on a second, these men were all working for a predominantly gay organization. Then, you know, Chelsea Manning and David Schuyler were whistleblowers, so they went through the, you know, hounding and maiming program. And that's when this happened. And then on the other hand, you've got Gareth Williams, who died in a safe house. Now, whatever made him die, he might have died of other causes and ended up, you know, but someone came into an MI6 safe house, which probably must be one of the most surveyed things on the planet. Okay, so whoever came in was MI6. Okay, so whoever put him in there was MI6. So Gareth was put into a sports bag by MI6. And then, you know, I mean, from the previous two cases, I would say that they also, you know, scattered expensive women's clothes around the flat. Why would they want to do that? Because, you know, I mean, that's another thing, you know, have expensive women's clothes lying around your flat on the day that you know, decide to strap yourself into, or be strapped into a sports bag, is again too much of an outlier of a coincidence. So he didn't do it. The people who put him into the sports bag scattered the women's clothes. Why would they do that? To imply that he was dressing as a woman? It has no function, not even as a red herring. What is it? What it is sexual denigration. It is sexual denigration. But by whom? Well, it is sexual denigration by an organization where you're gay is not sexual denigration, right? You can't call somebody gay when you're the gay organization, because it's like, yeah, you know, that's true, Trevor, we all are, you know, we're MI6 after all. So within MI6, you can't just smear somebody and say, oh, he's gay, because your bosses are gay, okay? So that's okay, but if you want to really denigrate them, you would say that he's a woman, because amongst gay guys, being a woman is like, pfft, who the fuck wants to be a woman, right? That's what it is. So okay, so from the case of Gareth Williams, we can pretty much deduce that what happened is he was murdered by MI6, or he died, and then he was set up, and MI6 staged this in their own little safe house, and then they bothered to smear him. So for some reason, MI6 agents were very, very angry at Gareth. What could that be? Maybe it helps that, you know, to understand that he actually started off at GCHQ, as I've read. Maybe, Anyway, we don't have to get into that. Bottom line is that they, MI6, felt the need to denigrate him. And they did that by implying that he was a woman or dressed like a woman. That he either wanted to be a woman or that he dressed like one. So again, sexuality matters the earth. And unless you understand what MI6 traditionally was, you cannot understand what it means when you suddenly have expensive women's clothes, not just strewn around the flat, but they make a point out of putting that into the papers and bang on about that. Okay? It was important to them. It's not important for the case in any way, shape or form. It was important to MI6. Why? Because they wanted to denigrate the math prodigy. Okay. So it is hugely important. It is hugely important. And it's, you know, then you can also go and look at David Child and you think, you know, was that him or was that some sort of brain interference or hormonal upset? You know, there's the Americans also research something that's, I think, called the gay bomb and stuff like that. How can you make, you know, how do you disrupt the sexuality of people and so on? That was a serious research project. So, you know, when you have these whistleblowers suddenly having these really odd, highly unlikely sort of, you know, features, and it happens several times in a row, you think, what's happening here? But either way, the bottom line is that you have this sexual element, and again, murder and sex, or sexuality, are very, very closely linked. And in Gareth's case, this is like the bombshell, right? You know, even if you didn't know that he was, you know, he was found in an MI6 safe house, as soon as you read with expensive women clothes strewn, you think MI6. You think that straight away, because it made it into the papers, you see. Because if it had been a foreign agency killing this agent, and they, you know, it's not an MI6 safe house, and it's just found somewhere, and they're expensive women clothes, you know, the gay men inside MI6 would understand what the foreign intelligence agency was trying. It was trying to denigrate their own agents. They're not going to put that into the papers, especially because it's such an embarrassment that one of their own agents like died on their own watch. You know, they're not going to put that in the papers. So Gareth was not actually killed by a foreign power, whatever anybody says. Gareth Williams must have been killed by MI6 because MI6 wrote their signature across his entire death. That's what it means. And you only understand that if you understand the importance of sexuality. So Gareth Williams was killed by MI6. Maybe it helps to understand that that's not telling you anything like super secret here. This is just common sense. But another public snippet in the public domain, and it's also, I think it was in a BBC article or one of the mainstream press, it said that Gareth, before he died, he was saying to his sister that he really wanted to get back to GCHQ because he didn't like, I think, as he put it, the fast cars and you know, misogynist environment of MI6. So he wanted to get back to GCHQ, you know, to the coding people. Yeah, fast cars, money, machismo, misogyny, yeah, that's what you would expect, okay? Now, when you have analyzed this, there's actually so much more to his death because MI6 didn't stop there. One of the things that when I heard about this and I, you know, looked around, I thought, what on earth just happened? One of the things that you can find online is also a YouTube video where I think two guys play through and, you know, in a kind of jokey sort of educational video sort of way.
Yeah,
could Gareth Williams really have wrapped himself into that sports bag? And they bang on about it for 15 minutes. Now, I could never actually watch more than 3 minutes of this because I get so angry, I feel physically sick and I have to stop. But the mere fact that we have this little video out there when one of the MI6 agents dies so egregiously, and the two blokes who are doing this are there with a British accent, and if I remember the images of the bathroom correctly, it looks like a bathroom somewhere in London. It's like from the plumbing, the general, you know, shitness of the plumbing, you think that's in somewhere in England, you know, probably. So you have literally 2 British blokes staging that in a British bathroom and putting it up online, and the British intelligence agencies leave it up online. Well, if a foreign power had killed Gareth Williams, and I would be the head of MI5, MI6, any trace of that video would be wiped off the last recesses of the internet, to make a point, because otherwise it would be laughing in your face. So the fact that it's still up online, again, shows that what it actually is, it is MI6 smearing it across, like, there we go, we do whatever we like, we kill them, we don't care. And then they make such a mockfest out of this. Now, with all these things combined, with the women's clothes, where Gareth was, found, how he was found, the cover-up afterwards, many other questions, and then this little video that's put out there, who was the head of MI6 at the time? Hang on, the person who attended Gareth's funeral was, I think, John Soares. Now, given that Gareth was a math prodigy, and I explained at the very beginning that we're now dealing with complex human systems, okay? And in complex human systems, the 21st century will be all about complex human systems. All about it, and complex systems in general. Complex computer systems, complex human systems, complex ecosystems, complex interactions of many other systems, but that's what we're dealing with, okay? In that environment, every mathematician you have is worth gold. Every math prodigy you have is worth gold, because in complex systems, prodigies have natural intelligence, not so much AI, but natural intelligence, right? And within seconds, they can recognize things that other people take years to recognize or might not even get to in their life. So, in the 21st century, Gareth Williams is more valuable, or was more valuable, than the entire heads of MI6 put together, right? That's just a fact from maths and physics. So, when you have him murdered so egregiously, what it is, and the head of MI6 at the time lets it happen the way he did. He might not realize, but what he actually does is that Gareth's death is a loss to my generation. He was my age. And then when you have that little video put out, okay, and then the head of MI6 actually goes and attends the funeral with this little video out there, and the women's clothes, making it into the newspapers. What this is essentially John Soares turning around to my generation and saying, fuck you to my generation. And I guess it's my responsibility, now that I talk about it, to turn around and say, no, Sir John, fuck you. Fuck you. So, anyway, this is now the importance of sex in the intelligence agencies and murder. They love murder. They murder absolutely everybody of value, it seems. And they do it, if you understand why, they do it for the same reason they fuck children, as it seems, which is because they, without knowing, are preparing the takeover of the UK, or the takeover of Germany, or the takeover of Switzerland by a foreign power, by a foreign entity. That's why. That's why the math prodigies die, because they have to go for somebody else to come in. Okay? It's degrading the country before you come in from elsewhere. So, how the hell to cycle out of this? The only way to cycle out of it is to actually get through to these guys and say, well, because of the collapsing ecosystems, that sets actually a pretty tight deadline. We have to go through this tower and work through it very quickly, like actually by yesterday, Killing 2/3 of the population is not going to fly because of the complex supply chains and the complex systems we have. Literally nothing will work if you do that. Agriculture won't work. It will be a total collapse, internal collapse. Okay, we don't have the knowledge and the skills to be doing things, you know, in a really basic fashion. So that doesn't actually work. So what we have to do is solve the corruption, stop the directed energy weapon attacks into the heads of intelligent people, like it's happening now here in Switzerland, even after I notified Marco Seiler and I asked him to cease and desist several times. The dude still hasn't understood that shooting into my head is equal to preparing the invasion of Switzerland, because it takes like 32 steps to understand, which is way past most men, let's be honest. So here we are. Yeah, but we have to do all this, I'm afraid, gentlemen. So for us to be able to stop the corruption, I mean, you know, we want to be here to cycle the economy, to cycle finance, right? To be able to cycle the economy. We have to stop the directed energy weapons. We can't because you're all so freaking corrupt. And why are you so corrupt? Well, I explained, because of all these mechanisms, because of the corruption of the kiddie fucking, right? Which, you know, as a result, put men there whose top qualification is that they put their knob into children. Not because they are experts at military strategy, okay? That's why they don't understand these 32 steps programs I'm trying to talk about. Okay. Now, that's not even it all, right? Because on top of that, they also have control files. So they have to listen to whoever's above them. Must be somebody really ancient, right? And really rich. They have to listen to that, and then on top of the control files, they are monarch programmed. And interestingly enough, you know, the very same John Soros, to whom I sent a message just now, was also the person who appeared in the previous episode at the end, whose family featured in the Daily Mail, right? And his daughter and his wife, if that's actually his daughter and his wife, you know, could be swapped images. But either way, you know, those two ladies claiming to be his daughter and his wife seem to be doing a chair dance, right? Seem to imply that they are both sold into slavery, and it also seems to imply that the head of MI6 seems to be selling his daughter into slavery as well, because she was parroting her mom on the chair dance. So that's pretty monarch programming, you know, slavery, mindfuck nonsense that these people seem to be really deep into. Sadly, they are so deep into it as they are deep into their own backsides. And we have to get their head out to be able to cycle the system, like really urgently. So, you know, we have to, that's why all these pedophile arrests are really important, because we need to get the pedophiles out of the system to put the real people here, because some people are actually down here, you know, they have to be put back. For example, one person talking about murder, one of the women, a woman who was also attacked with directed energy weapons, you know, she was attacked for 10 years, was Dr. Ronnie Kilder, the ex-chief medical officer of Finland. Now, Dr. Ronnie Kilder is one of those brilliant women. I think she spoke 5 languages fluently. She was amazing. She was super smart, super clever, and also she was an expert in military strategy. And she saw all this. And imagine, as a woman, she was trying to warn. She was trying to warn us all from what is coming, because she understood military strategy. She understood national security. Guess what happened to her? She was publicly executed by the intelligence agencies with directed energy weapons. She was publicly executed in February 2015. So we have what seems to be, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, that really goes deep, because Dr. Ronnie Kilder was one of the most precious people we had. She was a national treasure, and she was publicly executed. So whoever isn't incensed and outraged about the murder of Dr. Ronnie Kilder doesn't understand national security, because she was one of our generals and she was murdered. And actually Gareth Williams the same. He was one of the generals of my generation, and he was murdered, and then he was mocked. posthumously. And similarly, Aaron Swartz. He was one of the generals of my generation, and he was murdered. So that's what we're dealing with, ladies and gentlemen. Murder goes to the heart of this. And when sexual denigration and mockery ensues, then you know that the foreign army is preparing to take us over. That's what it means. So I hope I could explain these things to you. I want again draw your attention to the fact that I also mentioned the importance of homosexuality, but do not ever, ever try to do the reverse and say our problem are gay men. No, they are not. It just so happens because of a selection bias, excuse me. I'm also hit on my throat, and then I can't speak when I'm being hit with these weapons. Gay men are not our problem. It is true that there happened to be an accumulation of militant gay men at the top of the military and the intelligence agencies by a natural selection process. Okay, that's a selection bias. Okay, and yes, once those militant gay guys are let loose with directed energy weapons on women, they'll maul them to pieces because they don't care. They're not just psychopathic, they're also gay, and so women are a waste of space. But you cannot do the reverse and say, oh, gay men are the problem, because they're not. The real problem is the militancy and the intelligence agencies, right, and the military, obviously. But we don't need a military right now. We do trade with China. We do trade with Russia. We want to do more of it. We want to cycle to a civil society. And now we're globally connected. So having these huge war machineries is a waste of space. It is a disaster waiting to happen. Okay? The real problem is the militancy. And the second problem, which is where, you know, this comes from, is men. I'm sorry, it is men. War is always the pursuit of men. And that's what we have. The entire planet has just gone too masculine and lost its mind in a total surfeit of testosterone. Really, we need to restore the balance. You know, and people have said that throughout the centuries. You need yin and yang, right? You need two parts to this. You need to have balance. So what we need to do is put the female element back. And that's why we need to save all the women. Dr. Ronnie Kilder, being a woman, had more insight into military strategy than all of NATO generals put together. That's just the truth. So women can be generals. Sometimes women are even better generals. And in what's coming in the 21st century, we need predominantly female generals, because we need to work all out and we need to fight to repair systems. Not fight to restore, fight to destroy, but fight to restore. That's the truth. We need more women. And then what's the problem with men? Okay, to finish on an amusing note, just Google, and maybe I'll include a link to an image of what, you know how women have got two X chromosomes and men have got an X and a Y chromosome. Now, I think for the first time I actually saw what looks like, I'm not sure if this is an electron microscope image of a Y chromosome and an X chromosome. And if you just look at it, what an X chromosome actually looks like, you think, sorry, what the Y chromosome looks like, you think, it looks like there's something missing, like quite a lot. Okay, so when you've got women, they would have two X chromosomes, and then you have a man who's got an X chromosome, and then with something that looks like a chunk, with most of the important information missing. And you think, now the world makes a lot more sense. So this is the importance of, you know, sex and sexual intercourse and murder as well, sadly. And now that we're talking about, you know, everything to do with sex, oh God, I guess the one last thing that I haven't mentioned, because it's just too sick, which is, I was wondering what the hell is going to top, you know, the bit at the top when it's all pedophilia. How can child and woman maiming and killing psychopaths outdo each other at the very top. And what's sicker than shagging children? And then suddenly it occurred to me, it's like, oh my god, they worship goats, right? So what if at the very top we'll find the goat people who just shag goats? I think as we're pulling back the curtains, I think we might be in for some surprises. So brace yourself to find the goat people at the very, very top, God. When I realized, I was like, gee, baffle me. They worship goats. How could I miss that? So anyway, brace yourself for that. But anyway, apart from that, now that we're talking about, sex and so on, and fucking and all this stuff, because, making love has nothing to do with any of the things that I talked about. There's one quote which I think is one of my favorite quotes, which is why it's hanging up here. And it seems quite apt, because when you hear all this, you have to also realize we need your help to cycle the system. So you have to understand this. You have to understand the importance of all the things that I said. You have to understand the importance of the paedophile arrests. You have to support the survivors of child sex abuse. You have to support women who are being mutilated. And you have to understand that in the 21st century, with modern warfare, your generals don't look like in the 20th century anymore. In the 21st century, your generals are women, or they're even teenagers with a laptop. They might be teenage math prodigies. There might be women, there might be disabled people, because we are dealing with completely different situations of warfare or system instabilities, which also will take a battle to restore, back to normality and peace, if you like. So I predict that the wars of the 21st century will, for final time be against each other, but then the war will be to stabilize our systems, and for that we need every single person. And in that battle, we need everybody. We need absolutely everybody. And it doesn't matter what color you are, if you have a disability or not. What really matters is how you interface with other people and how you can stabilize the system. So you have to understand all this. So, this quote seems quite apt. We need you all. We all need you to care. So this is my favorite quote, and I would like to end on this, given that we're on the sex topic. You should give a fuck. You really should. But only about things that set your soul on fire. Save your fucks for magical shit. And I think this is truly magical shit. If we get through this, if you manage to survive the Titanic situation, we can all be proud of ourselves and each other. Thank you for listening, and bye for now.
All right. That was definitely very interesting. It's been a great night. I think we learned a hell of a lot. I'm going to wrap things up because it's pretty much 3 a.m. where I'm at. And, maybe we'll see you guys tomorrow. And appreciate you being here. If you wouldn't mind, give it a thumbs up. And we'll see you again. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you had a fun time. And good night. I'll make sure also that I'll upload all the streams that we've done on these things into my videos section, so it'll be a little bit more viewable and not hidden, and it's not in the live tab. So again, thanks for watching.